Hello, everybody. We are live. Welcome to the show once again. I told you we weren't done just because the season was over. We've got a lot more Seahawks stuff to talk about, and I am joined once again by Brandon of the Hawks Nest. Brandon, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Brandon. How you holding up?
I'm doing pretty well, man. It's playoff football, unfortunately, without us being involved, but there is football to be had, and there are things being done. And before we know it, we're going to have to make some decisions on some of these outgoing free agents. We got, like every team in the league does, a list of players who could stay or go this offseason. But before we get into that, we got to talk about the pound of flesh that we have been served up this last week, because it looked like we weren't even going to get that. And I'm not going to pretend like this is going to be sufficient for most people because it shouldn't be. But nevertheless, it got served up Monday night after that Rams Cardinals playoff game. I know you've already talked about it some, but Ken Norton Jr., after 4 years as a defensive coordinator, is out of Seattle in the unemployment line, filling out that form on the internet where they ask you stuff like, is there anything you could have reasonably done to keep your job? And then he's doing all that.
Yeah.
And we got some stuff to talk about with the Ken Norton Jr. firing. So, what are your general takeaways from just the fact that we moved on from him?
Well, it's a little bit of, and it's I guess no coincidence that both of these guys were hired at the very same time in 2018, being both him and Schottenheimer, and that the feeling is very much similar to Schottenheimer leaving last year, and that is that I don't I don't put all of the problems upon their shoulders. I think there's a lot of problems with this team. I do think, though, that they're not really helping matters. No matter where you see them, I don't think they're part of the solution, but I do indeed believe that they are part of the problem. So there's more to be done in addition to letting Norton go or letting Schottenheimer go. But those were fairly big issues overall. I do still land at the end point on all of this in the respect of believing that it doesn't really have a great deal of an effect as far as this defensive performance going forward, because this is still Coach Carroll's defense. This is still his baby. We've got to understand that if this is a guy that puts himself onto the side of the offensive ball so much and dictates so much onto that side of the ball as to what they do, this is something he actually cares and really loves about. Offense is like a necessary evil that he's got to deal with. The defense is his baby. And so to believe he's going to bring somebody in and they're going to change Carroll's mindset on what he wants to have done, and then you add this on top of Carroll's still remaining control as far as the personnel department goes. Put those two things together, and it's hard for me. I struggle to find how there's going to be much change driven by this. It's good to bring in outside ideas, but again, I'm not even so certain that it's been a lack of outside ideas here. It's a lack of listening to outside ideas. I think that's been some of the problem that's stacked up prior to this.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I said in the video I made right after Norton got fired. Oh, mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Everything okay over there?
We're good. Yep.
All right.
My bad.
Yeah, I said that, it's good that Norton got fired, but it's not necessarily going to matter as much as you might assume that it would. It is that pound of flesh where it's like, okay, I did something fine, but I kind of feel like they had this makes sense, right? Norton had been here for 4 years and had not yet managed to have a top 10 defense. It was, I think, 11th, 15th, 22nd, and 11th. And by the way, this most recent year, it was teed up for him, and he still couldn't do it. He was 5th in points allowed. We had 3 games left against the Bears with Nick Foles, the Lions with Tim Boyle, and the reeling Cardinals with no DeAndre Hopkins, and he still couldn't do it. It was actually like almost like he was intentionally trying to make sure, oh, I can't have that top 10 defense. But when you take a look at the previous defensive coordinators who had been here under Pete, they had all managed to put together top 3 defenses at least once in their career. And the thing with Norton is that we kept giving him more talent. We bring in a Jadeveon Clowney on a trade. We bring in a Quandary Diggs on a trade. We do the Jamal Adams trade. We spend the top draft capital on Jordan Brooks, LJ Collier, Marquise Blair, who hasn't really done anything since he got here, like Daryl Taylor. So to me, it makes sense, but this is definitely a scenario where it's just kind of a distraction from the big issues. However, we do know that Ken Norton was the play caller for this defense, right? That's what Pete has always been saying. Norton's been the play caller since he's been here. So you will see some change there.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And to add to your point in that, don't you also have to include in your assessment of Norton, I would believe, his time with the Raiders, which was 2015 to 17, where, and it's important, and I think it's pertinent, Brendan, because of the fact that's the time when he had Khalil Mack, and he never got that Raider defense any higher than where he got our Seahawks defense. In fact, about 19th is where he is for his, that's where he lies as a defensive coordinator for his entirety, and now what, 7 years as a defensive coordinator. And that's not good enough in any respect. So there's enough of that's not a sample size data, Brendan, or that's not just a one job point of data you're looking at. That's a couple stops now. So I do agree. It should, this does kind of come down to my point a little bit too, where it's even with Waldron having the bumps he had this year, at least he was doing some modernized approaches that were missing within Schottenheimer's offense, which still make me like Waldron better than what I was looking at with Schottenheimer, who I thought this is a guy with his old ass defense that's not going to get updated anytime soon. He doesn't know how to update it. I think Norton's in the same kind of place where at least you're bringing an outside guy in potentially who's got the ability to do some innovations, some new tricks here, which Norton just doesn't have.
Right. So we want to talk a little bit about who we might be replacing Norton with, because that's very interesting. But first, there was one aspect of this Norton firing that I think was interesting. So it didn't look like we were going to do anything. And then Pete had that meeting with Jody Allen on, I think it was Thursday night, was the general consensus is when that happened. And then you see Norton get fired. Now, it could just be us trying to read a little too much into it, but we also know that Ken Norton is Pete's guy from USC. They were together at USC. They've been together for a long time. Those guys are close to each other. So it almost feels like it could have been something where Jody Allen went, hey, you got to give me something here. I can't just keep it all the same. Like you got to give me somebody to offer up to the sacrifice here. Do you feel like maybe that happened?
I think your pound of flesh reference is apropos here in the respect of this is what this feels like of here, you guys happy with that? Are you fans that are bitching and moaning happy? We gave you something. And that's the part that I think just tones down my level of excitement for this movie, even being happy to see it, because it feels like a motion move to sort of placate the fan base rather than being a move really truly to, again, get back to that thing that I was talking about, which is actually fixing the things that have been problems prior, finding solutions for those issues that have plagued you prior. And so that's the part that kind of more than anything else sort of just kind of burrs me a little bit about this move, Brendan, and how I look at it going, I'm not really buying in on this. You're not going to placate me with this. I need to see more than this. I need to see more than these kind of empty moves with it, because I agree with you. It doesn't signify much change. And again, if it's being done from a PR standpoint, and let's face this, Brendan, this front office recently has done certain things to sort of massage the PR game of things, right? I referenced the Sherman situation as a key example of this. They don't reach out to Sherman throughout his time period, throughout this season, as far as to bring him back into the fold. Then once they hear he's about to sign with Tampa Bay and he's on like the runway, they give him a call. What was that done for? Because you were trying to really bring him back in, or so that you could come back to the fan base and say, see, we tried to bring back the old legend, and we just, he just didn't want to do it. And that's the stuff that's not being, it's not being honest with the fan base, and it's sort of kind of talking down to us like we're idiots, in the way that it treats the fan base if you're doing that sort of stuff. And I'm sure all franchises probably do it, Brendan, to some degree. It's just seeming more transparent now more than ever, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And that being said, there's no reason why you can't get somebody better than Ken Norton Jr. was as a DC. Just because it's not going to radically change the defense, because we all know that Pete's not going to bring in a Wade Phillips and say, okay, turn my beloved cover 3-4-3 into a heavy blitzing 3-4. Right. But we can still get somebody better than Norton. And to that point, I'm going to go through a couple super chats here. We got Paydirt Sports Cards. Thank you for the $5. When has Pete interviewed candidates like Desai? Never have they ever. It was always people in Pete's circle of trust. And that is true. And that is something we're going to talk about for a second now, because so far this Seahawks team has been linked with 4 candidates that I've heard of. You've got Ed Donatel, longtime coach in the NFL, over 30 years. You have Desai, who is referenced in this comment, defensive coordinator from the Bears. You have the guy they interviewed last night, Joe Witt Jr., who spent most of his time with, I think it was the Packers, but most recently was on the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Clint Hurt, the in-house defensive line coach, who might be going to the Miami Hurricanes this offseason if he doesn't get this promotion.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on this crop of candidates for the DC job?
So I did a little bit of research on this, Brendan. Give me a little bit of time to give you a quick breakdown on this, just a quick overview on this, because I did some looking into all of these coaches as far as their recent history is concerned. Ed Donatel was a defensive coordinator a couple of different times. Washington, he had his best year in 2008. He was fourth in total yards allowed, sixth in points per game. With Atlanta, he started out, he was there for 3 years as a defensive coordinator, started out really hot, 14th in total yards, 15th in points per game, or middle of the road, I should say. It got slightly worse as he went along there, but they went from also having Michael Vick at quarterback to having Matt Schaub at quarterback by its end. And the offense wasn't as good, obviously, by that point. Joe, that's all he's done as much as a defensive coordinator. Of course, he's been a couple of years with Vic Fangio now over there doing his stuff with Denver. They've been okay. They've been all right. I like him a lot, though. I think everywhere I looked at with him, he was pretty solid. To be honest with you right now, Brandon, he would be my number one guy of the guys they've mentioned as far as the guy that I think I'd be most interested in. I know he's an older guy, which gives you some hesitancy at first, but I do think that bringing in the young guy, Brendan, a little bit of what happened into your super chat's point on this, they have done a hire like this side. That was what Waldron was last year. Waldron was not within Pete Carroll's inner circle or something that Pete Carroll wanted to do. So this would be more along the line of what they did last year. The problem, though, as we know with Waldron, is what? They didn't let him really run the full context of his offense throughout the course of the season. We knew Carroll had some kind of overbearing part onto that. So why would it be different if you brought in a Desai? That would be my one question. Though I will say this, Desai is number 2 on my list. And when you look at Desai, Brendan, he does not have the pedigree or past of Witt or of Donatel. But what he did with the Bears last year and where he brought that defense, they sat 6th in total yards, 3rd against the pass. They were 22nd in points allowed, but you've got to factor in the fact that offense was horrible. It was just doing 3 and outs like our offense was. You keep punting over to the defense. Eventually, they're going to kind of fail and give up some points. But to do that without Khalil Mack there, Eddie Goldman wasn't back up to snuff. Akeem Hicks was out. They lost one of their cornerbacks this offseason. The defense was really very much in sort of a rebuilding kind of mold outside of like a Raekwon Smith and the safety they got. So to get that job done in his first year was amazing. He has no pedigree, though, beyond that, Brendan. I mean, you're going off of a guy who has literally shot through the ranks like a bullet to get to where he is. Though to do what he did with the Bears, that is as eye-opening as it gets. And there are people around the league really noticing him when you read up stories. He would be one of those bright young minds, the interesting minds to bring into the fold. Again, will Carroll allow him to push his innovative ideas, his young ideas? Will he? That's the question at hand, right? Witt's the guy that probably Hurt. Can me and you both agree on this right now? Hurt does not get us excited. Does he get you excited as an option?
Yeah. I don't have anything bad to say about him. I actually did a little reading on him. He sounds like he's got some stuff. Sounds like he's got some stuff in that resume that is credible, but I mean, there's nothing exciting about it.
Yeah.
I think he actually, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, he's also a guy who has some experience under Fangio from the past, which is a kind of recurring trend with all these guys. But he's another Pete Carroll guy. He's another guy who would probably just be a yes man, and he wouldn't necessarily be bringing much in from the outside. So the one thing I could say about Clint Hurt is if he was the DC, he probably wouldn't be dropping defensive linemen into coverage very much because he was a defensive line coach, and you'd think he would know what these guys can actually do well. But
yeah,
not excited.
That your yes man is exactly the main thing of what doesn't get me excited with him. He's getting the defensive coordinator job in Miami. Okay, great. It's a defensive. Miami's not at their height of heights they were 20 years ago. It's not the same state, that program. Him going to be a defensive coordinator is not as impressive to me. And frankly, when I look at his recent handiwork, LJ Collier didn't develop. Rasheen Green was here for 4 years and really didn't get all that much better from the time he arrived here. Poona Ford didn't get much done over at the 3 technique when you moved him over there. I'm sure he's had some other development spots that have been nice within there, but I'm sorry, you've not exactly blown me away to elevate you at that point and promote you. You need to do more than that for me to promote you. That's just where I stand. And I'd rather to see whoever we bring in, Brendan, somebody at least got some kind of past history as a defensive coordinator. As we learned with Waldron, we got to go through some of these bumps and learning curve stuff when you get the new guy in there for the first year. And we're really, I think at this point can be agreeing that they're going to try to go for this next year. They're not going to be in a rebuild. Let's play it out for one more year through the road, outside of maybe moving Russell, of course, as a possibility. So he just, to me, he doesn't do much. By the way, is the other guy he's not a guy that doesn't do a ton for me either. Looking at his history, here's his breakdown. And I just did passing yards with him because he was only a secondary coach, Brendan, with the Packers for that time you mentioned, which was 2009 through 17. So I'll just give you the numbers over that period. They were 5th, 32nd, 11th, 24th, 10th, 6th, 31st, 23rd, loses his job. So middle of the road from a secondary state. Now he did get a like a defensive player of the year type season out of Woodson. He actually took Woodson's game to the next level from going there from the Raiders. Tremont Williams, Casey Hayward, Micah Hyde, Clinton Dix. He's developed
Sam Shields.
Sam Shields. That was my last guy on the list. Yeah, Sam Shields also on that list. So he is a very good developer of cornerbacks. The yards allowed are kind of, but then again, maybe you have to factor this in, Brendan, too, was you got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback on the other side. He's putting up points, meaning the other team on the other side is probably having to throw more than they run. So it's going to elevate some of those yards given up numbers go. He was 7th with the Browns in 2019 as their I think it was defensive coordinator at that point. 2020 with Atlanta 32nd and 18th with the Cowboys last year as just passing coordinators. So he's been okay, right? He's been all right. Good, sometimes great, sometimes near league worst. What do you think?
Well, I think one thing to remember, that thing you said about how having Aaron Rodgers kind of inflates your passing yards allowed a little bit. Like in 2011, when the Packers went 15-1 and Aaron Rodgers had probably the greatest quarterback season ever, the Packers defense was terrible in terms of ranks because other teams had to just keep chucking the ball just to try to keep up. But the defense was never losing games. They just gave up a lot of yards. I think most of those years they had bad ranks in terms of yards. They were getting a lot of interceptions, which I think is one way to mitigate that. You're taking the ball away a lot to mitigate the fact that you are giving up yards. But yeah, one thing that I really paid attention to when I was looking at these resumes was safety play, because to me, the hardest part of this all is, can the new defensive coordinator get the most out of Jamal Adams? Because clearly Ken Norton could not. I mean, not even close. I mean, last year was a joke. He's dropping back in cover 2 constantly. And I really tried to look at things through that lens, because to me, that's the most important thing. Maybe the second most would be developing Darrell Taylor into the next Von Miller. But I was really focusing on that. And with one thing is, like I was looking at Donatel. He is a cover 2 guy. I'm not crazy about the cover 2 with Jamal, but maybe you could find some way to modify it so that Jamal's able to do what he does. And over Donatel's career, he actually did work with a lot of pretty high-profile safeties. It was like a 30-year career. I was looking at it. When he was with the Broncos, they had Steve Atwater, and they had who was the other guy? Braxton? He was a Pro Bowler too. The other safety across from Atwater in Denver was another guy who made a Pro Bowl and was considered to be a really good safety. For the Packers, they had Darren Sharper, who may have been the best safety of that era.
And Butler.
Yeah, and Leroy Butler. That's another good one. Recently in Denver, Justin Simmons. You can give him some credit for helping develop him, because he was the defensive back coach. So Justin Simmons was involved in that. In San Francisco, they were a safety factory. They had Eric Reed, Deshaun Goldson, and Dante Whitner. I think all those guys made at least one Pro Bowl under the Fangio/Donatel group. So he seems to have crossed paths with a lot of really good safeties. And I know Jamal Adams doesn't play like other safeties. I know he's kind of you don't see very many Jamal Adamses. It's not a great comparison to compare a guy like Justin Simmons to a Jamal Adams. They don't really play the same way, but that caught my eye. And with Desai, the thing that I like is he was a safety coach for 2 years in Chicago. And when he was a safety coach, they had Eddie Jackson, one of the best safeties in the league. So I feel like that's kind of where we are going as well in trying to find this defensive coordinator. Find somebody who can get the most out of Jamal.
Well, that's got to be a question being asked in the interview process, right, Brendan? Like that's going to be one of the more pointed questions. It's going to be it's not just an empty answer you're giving back to the coach and the company when they're asking it. What are you going to do to do better than what we've been able to do prior and getting the most, or what are you going to do just to get the most out of Jamal Adams? What is your plan of attack? You, Donatel, like to run more cover two in your past history. How do you move off of that a little bit to do it? I agree with you in that with his. This is a little bit of the nice point of having age with having done a variety of things is that he's kind of been everywhere and seen everywhere. So maybe he's got to, there's that time in Atlanta where I had Lawyer Malloy after we got him over from Buffalo and we were able to utilize, he's a great blitzing safety that we were able to utilize in that function. I feel like maybe he can call upon some of those old tricks that give him a little bit of those wrinkles, though. To your point again, he's never. It's really been more of the safeties you mentioned, the safeties we mentioned. Leroy did a little bit of blitzing, but Darren Sharper was more of your free safety skyer type guy that was there to pick stuff off. So that is more of the free safety types, or more of where he's probably Justin Simmons, who's free safety. That's where he's done more of his bread and butter with, but. With that said, this is the important question, but that's also why you touch on this is what interests me most about Donatel as a name. His stops, he's been very good everywhere he's gone. You mentioned about those Niner defense and the safeties. Let's also give him credit for not having always the lot to work with in his past career. In Atlanta, he did have D'Angelo Hall, but not a lot else on the other side, not a lot else with the safety play. In San Francisco, those teams, something that stands out to me, at least when I look at those in retrospect, I'm talking 12, 13, 14-ish, Brendan.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have first round pick corners out there. You had your Tremaine Brock types, and you had your, just kind of guys they were getting the most out of. And so another guy that maybe with some of his technique, training, ability can get more done with less. And we already have that a little bit with Carroll anyway. Can't hurt. It can hurt in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was one thing I really focused on. And I was also trying to think about obviously the Daryl Taylor thing, because like I said, if Jamal's the most important thing for the new DC to consider, I think the second most important thing is that you develop Daryl Taylor, because we have a guy who could be a long-time Pro Bowl pass rusher. I think it's a little early to crown him, but you can see the talent there. So I was looking at Sean Desai, and one thing that stood out to me was when he became the defensive coordinator last year in Chicago, Robert Quinn, who looked like he had just completely fallen off a cliff and his career was basically over, suddenly got hooked up to the rejuvenation machine and became one of the best pass rushers in the league again. So I don't know if he filled up on a bunch of steroids. And by the way, Robert Quinn has a weird career. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever looked at his career, but he's great for years with the Rams, and then he disappears for 5 years. Suddenly he's back in Dallas, double-digit sack guy. Then he disappears, and now he's back with this 19 sack season.
Can I say what I think was the disappearance on the big part of his career after he left? After he left the Rams, what I think the problem was, if I remember, he went to the Dolphins and they turned him into it. This is again a long thing I harp on, Brendan. This is why for stuff like this, he went to the Dolphins, and what did the Dolphins do to this guy that was a 4-3 defensive end sack master with the Rams? What do you think they did to him, Brendan? Turned him to an outside stand-up 3-4 linebacker. And this is a thing that I hammer with my chat all the time, where people go, Chandler Jones, Chandler Jones, Chandler Jones. And I go, folks, there is a wide history of taking guys in who stand up and then put their hand in the ground and fail, and guys who put their hand in the ground and then stand up and fail. So you may think you love Chandler Jones, and Chandler Jones is great. But when you're moving guys from one to another, you vastly change them as a player. Go look up Quinn's stats in a 4-3, then go look up Quinn's stats in a 3-4. He's rushing the passer in both, but it was a failure in that 3-4 defense. And that's one of the things that if I could put a rule of thumb to get Seahawks fans to lean in to start to, because I see more and more people with this 3-4 stuff. And it's like, well, we should have drafted TJ Watt. TJ Watt's an outside 3-4 linebacker. He was an outside 3-4 linebacker in Wisconsin. Do you think you're going to be able to get him to put his hand in the dirt? He's going to be exactly as productive as he is now, or anywhere near as productive. It's a leap of faith. And it's one you have to base it on a history to make me believe that it can happen again. So sorry, I went on a tangent with that, but that's, what is he back to playing again now? One of the things he come back to the Cowboys, to your point, why he went off again, went back to a 4-3 defense. Here with the Bears, back to a 4-3 defense where he's rushing as a defensive end, a down lineman. And that's where he's at. So it's just something I harp on, man. But yes, he did a great job with it.
Yeah, sometimes it is just that simple. And going back to the Donatel thing real quick, I was looking at some of the players he might have developed over his career. One guy that stuck out to me was, you remember KGB from the Packers? Kabir Jabala.
Oh, you're going to give it a try. No, now you got to
no,
do it. No, now you got to do it.
Kabir Jabala Biamila or something like that. I always got him back in Madden 2005. He was great in Madden. I would
he was twitchy.
Put him on one end, put Julius Peppers on the other end, and just meet me at the quarterback. But that was a guy who was like a 5th round pick. I think he was a rookie when Donatel first got there with his first defensive coordinator job. And then second year, he was like 6 sacks. And then the next year, 13 and a half, one of the best pass rushers in the league. So I kind of kept an eye on stuff like that too. Who have you developed as a pass rusher? So that kind of got me excited. So
I got another one for you.
Go ahead.
Patrick Kearney.
Well, Patrick Kearney was good before Donatel got there, though. I don't want to say he developed him, but he did get stuff out of him.
Yeah, I mean, he was good while he was there too. So he definitely at least got he didn't drop down a step. Yeah,
Kearney actually had his best year in Seattle, which was kind of interesting. Usually it goes the other way. You get paid and then you chill out. You don't get paid and then ball out.
He balled. That year was amazing. He was so awesome. We didn't last long with this, but boy, that 1 year was, whew.
It was worth it, right? It was worth it.
Totally worth it.
It was all our pass rush that year. I remember that very well.
Oh, it was. He was everything.
Yeah. And I guess the last couple of comments you can make about this defensive coordinator thing is, first of all, the Fangio connection, because a lot of these guys we're looking at have connections to Vic Fangio. Now, why we don't just get Vic Fangio, I think we all kind of know the answer to that, and we don't like it because he would want too much control. But a guy like Ed Donatel, who has been around for 30 plus years in the NFL, he's not coming in here just for Carroll to have complete control over him. So if you bring in Ed Donatel, isn't that kind of an indication that maybe we're going to do things at least a little bit differently in 2022?
I'm hopeful. That's one of the reasons he's my number one candidates on the board of the names that have been released. Because of that reason, I factor in not only just what a guy can do to get the most out of our roster, you've got to also factor in how well can he fight Carroll? How well can this guy put his resume on the table and say, Carroll can say, I'm a Super Bowl champion. Donatel can say, I'm a 2-time Super Bowl champion. So it's a difference of that to a Desai guy that can, what are you going to say? I got the Bears to the 6. Yeah, take a look at my rings. Here's the USC rings. Here's the Super Bowl ring. Maybe I'm being hopeful in this respect, Brendan, because there's still a part of me that goes almost no matter who you're going to bring in, it's Carroll's show still at the end of the day. But he gives me the most hope of the other candidates of being able to influence and push that voice, which is, I think, so necessary in that room right now. Almost above the innovator, almost above the guy that develops the best or gets the most out of the players.
Right. And Matty F. Brown on Twitter has been all over this for the past few days. He's been doing some great work. One thing he pointed out was that over the last season, the Seahawks defense was already kind of migrating towards something very similar to what Fangio does. So it's not really a stretch. It's not like completely incompatible. Where I think he was calling it quarter, half. It was very similar to what Fangio does.
Yeah.
So maybe this is just a way to kind of advance that change even further. And I can get behind that.
Yeah.
I think that's not bad.
A lot of what I believe he was doing to the Broncos recently is that split safety look, which is it gets into more of the cover. You got the 2 guys covering a zone to one side, and then it's a half field different read on the other side. Really, the key to it is this. You're doing 2 different things on each side of the field, as opposed to what you did before, which was you have the single high safety. You'd run it out there. You'd have your 2 corners drop deep. That used to be the old school coverage. You've gone more into kind of cover 2 times with a little bit like your point, a little sprinkling in of that stuff where you'll have the different safety doing one thing underneath where a Quandary might jump a route underneath as a robber roll. And then you've got a guy going to single high, or he's just covering to one half, and you got man going on the other side. But it's the split side, which makes you harder to not only harder to prepare for, but it also makes you harder pre-snap to know what you're going to do. And of course, we referenced about 2 months ago, Brendan, the stat about Seattle being really one of the teams, what they show you, 94%, I think was the stat at the time, deep into the season, which is what they show you pre-snap is what they are 94% of the time post-snap. So they don't try to confuse you what they're doing prior to what they show them. Whereas this is a little more of the bedrock, I think, of what Fangio is trying to do with that split safety stuff, which is make teams think they're going cover 2, and then you bring one guy underneath to freak them out and surprise them. And and if that's in conjunction with pressure, now you got interceptions. Now you got turnovers. That's the pathway to that.
Yeah, if Carroll was behind the Norton firing, I think it was probably because the lack of turnovers. This last year, we have some of the fewest turnovers in the league. Norton, back to his Oakland days, could not get turnovers. I remember they had one year where they had like 4 interceptions in 16 games or something. One thing with some of these guys you're looking at is they were able to get turnovers. Like if you went back and looked at the Jets in the early 90s when Carroll was the DC and Donatel was the secondary coach under Carroll, they got a lot of turnovers. Not really good teams, not great defenses, but they took the ball away. So that's probably a big part of this.
And it's got to be a part of Carroll's defense. His defense with the bend but don't break stuff, with the lack of, we're going to disguise a lot of stuff. We're going to run a lot of intricate blitzes at you, with the soft zone nature of things. You've got to have those squeeze zones with the quarterback windows and tip balls and ways that you're able to, or like with this, where you confuse an offense what they see pre-snap to post-snap. It's got to be a part because there's other elements to this defense that are just naturally missing within its natural flow and the way it runs from a contextual basis.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Real quick here, super chat from Charles Riley. Thank you for the $5. Good to see you two streaming. Listen to y'all speak intelligently makes me furious when I listen to some of the jokers on the airwaves. Well, I can't argue with you there. I think that's a pretty reasonable position to have. It does get tiring sometimes.
What's up, Charles? Good to see you. And yeah, I agree with you,
Mhm.
Charles. It's what I've been, I don't know about you, Brendan. I try to sometimes go back to some of the local stuff to try to just do podcasts, listen to it when you're just needing some blank noise in the background. And it just, sometimes I'm just going, boy, guys, come on, come on. I want them to
Mhm.
do great. But
Yeah. And Ryan Cobb, thank you for the $1 super chat. Appreciate the support. I don't think I've seen you in here before, but welcome to the channel and appreciate it.
what's up,
All
Brendan?
right. So now that we've spent like a good half hour on the defensive coordinator issue, I think we've said all we can say. We'll say more when we hire somebody. When we get the news that we've hired, it could be a couple weeks, by the way. There's no hurry on this for the moment.
No.
I don't think a guy like an Ed Donatel's like this super hot DC prospect that everybody's going to be converging on. Those guys are going to be like Fangio and Zimmer, who, by the way, some of the people in my chat want to get Zimmer, which I wouldn't be opposed to it, but he strikes me as a very cover two guy where he likes to drop both safeties back all the time. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Yeah, he does do a lot of that. He also has gotten into some. He's a little like of a strong personality that I don't know if that would mesh as well with Coach Carroll. The going rumor I've heard on this is that Dan Quinn's going to be hired by somebody probably as a head coach this offseason in the NFL somewhere, and that Zimmer would be your number one guy to go in there and replace him there. So I don't know, but the Zimmer thing just never. I love Zimmer. It'd be if they announce tomorrow that Zimmer's coming in. I'm not gonna love the cover two drop stuff, but he's one of those guys that's like Fangio to me a little bit, in that he's a better defensive coordinator than he's a head coach, and you put him in what he does good, and he will excel at that.
Right. And real quick, we should also, before we move on, actually throw a little bit of water on the Brian Flores and Dan Quinn people. It's not happening. I think we just both agree on that.
We're ice bucket challenging this one. It's not happening. Flores is going to go be a head coach somewhere. Somebody's going to recognize that he did a good job with Miami, wasn't given the right quarterback, wasn't given a lot of great personnel on the defensive side of the ball to implement his scheme properly. And he's a smart young coach. He's going to be hired. I think the same thing about Dan, as I just said. I think Dan's going to get hired by somebody out there. He got the first team that he coached to a Super Bowl. He turned that Dallas defense around in no small order this year. I mean, that Dallas defense was putrid the last couple of years. Turned them around. He's innovated the 4-3 under scheme to implement a lot more of the 3-4 base stuff while still using the 4-3 under tenants. So some team's just gonna go. They're gonna pluck him, I think, at that point, Brendan. That's usually enough to get a coach a second job in the league.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment of things. If we got Dan Quinn, I would be like, okay, that's kind of interesting, but I wouldn't be crazy about it. And besides, it would just be more of the same kind. Same with Gus Bradley. I don't hate Gus Bradley, but it would be another defense that never blitzes, has no aggression, and depends entirely on the front four.
That's the name I thought was going to jump to more of a forefront here, because I don't think that Davis is going to run it back with the interim coach there that took over for Gruden. In fact, there's already Harbaugh rumors of him going to the Vegas Raiders there, and if that happens, of course, Harbaugh's not going to run a 4-3. So you'll have Gus now without a job. I wondered if that was not going to be more of a, but we've heard no rumors of it. They're not seemingly interested in it, but that was one that I'd wondered if they would look at.
Yeah, I looked it up. Gus Bradley had the lowest blitz rate of any DC in the NFL last year, so I don't know how compatible that is.
Yeah. And I mean, you got Max Crosby, man, but that's all they have on that front four. So it's not exactly the type of front four you can rely on to only just get it done up front, in my opinion with that. So yeah, that's not, I wouldn't be excited by Dan Quinn either. Dan Quinn and Gus Bradley be equally to me, just kind of like, okay,
Uh-huh.
all right.
Yeah. Ryan Kopp, thank you for the $2. You don't remember me. Okay, I think I remember you now. Were you in my Sekiro stream the other night? I think I remember you. Okay, my bad. But it's your first time.
You went
Yeah.
3 tier emojis, brother.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You're
All
awesome,
right.
Ryan.
Yep. Thank you,
You're
Ryan.
awesome
I appreciate it.
regardless.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think what we're going to do now is we're going to start taking a look at some of these outgoing free agents because we've got quite a few of them. Decisions are going to be made in the next couple of months here. And we got to decide who we're going to keep and who we're going to go. So the idea that I had was that we would go down the list on Spotrac of our free agents to be. I think they become free agents like March 21st or something like that. It's sometime in March.
Yeah, you're right. It's right. That's right where the new league year turns over. You're correct.
Yeah. And we're just going to go in order until we get to the bottom of the list where it doesn't matter at all. We start when we start talking about guys like Dakota Shepley, you've gone a little too far down the rabbit hole. But
agreed.
Yeah. I figure we could alternate on players on who goes first, and then we can talk about it if there's anything to talk about. And basically, with each player, we're going to say what we think they are going to get on the market. And then we're going to say what we as the Seahawks organization would be willing to give them if you were in charge.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. So I'll go ahead and go first. And we're leading off with Dwayne Brown, who is about to turn, I think, 37 next year.
Oh, my goodness.
Had a decent year. It started bad. It got a little better as time went on. I think that if he still wants to play football and he hits the free market, I think somebody would probably give him 1 year, $7 million. I think it is going to be a 1 year deal, but he played good enough. He's got good pedigree. He's a former All-Pro. He played at an All-Pro level 2 years ago. I think a lot of people would be willing to look at him and give him the benefit of the doubt on some of this Wilson stuff, like saying Wilson was the reason why you gave up so many sacks last year more than your own bad play. I think somebody would give him 1 year, $7 million. I don't know if there's a price I would be interested in keeping him in Seattle for, because even though he was decent last year, it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. Like, let's say last year, 2 years ago, he was All-Pro, and then last year he was good.
Mm-hmm.
What's he going to be this year? Above average, average, below average? I'm just not that interested in it. I would say I don't really want to bring back Dwayne Brown for any price because he's not going to want to be a backup personally. I would just not even really make an offer here. What about you?
I think I find myself in the same place. I think you're pretty accurate on your number about a 1 year, $7 million deal. I think that I like you. I think his performance is going down, but I think the cincher for me is that you have a high likelihood of injury here going on. This is a guy that's had his share throughout the course of his career. He's had a couple of seasons cut short due to major injury. Now he's going to be 37 years old. You combine that with the fact that it's, I can't get away just paying him a 1 year, $2 million deal. Might be about as low as I'd go with him. I think that his play fell off enough to that degree. And again, the risk at play makes it so I just can't go over the top on that. So I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. I not a bad player, but we got to do better. Okay. I understand that there might be some temptation to just be like, okay, we're going to go really cheap at tackle this year. We're going to have Curhan on one side. We're going to bring back Dwayne Brown on a cheap year on the other side so we can spend on defense. But that's how we've been doing things for a little too long. I want to try something a little different.
Just the other thing too with that's a potential to me hazard is that you go out there and you bring back Dwayne Brown. Let's say we bring back 1 year, $5 million deal, right? He goes out there, starts, he gets injured week 2. Now you have Stone Forsythe going for the rest, because you can't, if you bring him back, you're probably not getting another left tackle in the draft at that point. You might, maybe they have enough foresight to go out ahead of that, but I could see them talking themselves into Forsythe being fine at backup, and then they just run with Dwayne Brown. So to me, you can't run into that phase of things. I don't believe either.
Mm-hmm. Charles Riley, thank you for the $5. Can Adams be used solely as a specialty rusher, period? I don't know how many snaps that gets him per game, but if he's a coverage liability, got to do something. Well, I don't think Jamal Adams is a coverage liability. His coverage numbers were actually quite good in 2021. In 2020, they were not very good, but there were a lot of reasons for that. I don't think Jamal Adams is a coverage liability, so that would be my thoughts on that.
Yeah, he's the coverage liability comes into when you have the guy going backwards rather than forwards. And so if you have him playing in a cover 1 or a cover 2, Charles, where he's going 3-4 steps back at the snap as opposed to coming downhill, that's not the best way to utilize him. And he's actually had his past, if you look through his coverage history, through his numbers going back to LSU, where in his final season, I think he was 4th in the nation in coverage as a safety, rated by Pro Football Focus's analytics there. And again, that's not the end all be all, but he had 5 interceptions in addition that year. He played really well. I think you got to put him in a position to succeed. And that has him more in that lurker robber type role that Cam Chancellor used to run. Cam didn't do cover 2 either, right? We didn't ask him to play cover 2. So I think you've got to get him more into the position to succeed. Pass rush wise, you couldn't put him down there as like a defensive end because now he's got to go up against a tackle. And if you watch Jamal when he's gotten the most of his work done, Charles, it's been done when he's against a running back or a tight end trying to block him in pass protection. Those are the guys that he feasts on. If you put him up against a tackle, I don't think that he's going to do as well in that type of situation.
Right. Okay. So Ryan Kopp, thank you for the $2. Imagine I waste all my money on you. Sign me up for that, Ryan. You can do that if you want to. No objection.
Hell yes, brother.
All right. Next up, you're going to lead with this one. It is Quandary Diggs turning 29. This is kind of a big one for a lot of people. So what have you got?
You gave me the controversial one here, Brendan. You gave me the big controversy one. Yes, we got Quandary Diggs here, 29 years old. Of course, I don't think there's been another safety in the game that's had more interceptions than him when he came to the Seahawks 2.5 seasons ago. He followed up another great year this year right before he did get injured in that final game. I think if you're looking at him in the open market, even with his injury, I think he's probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of a 3-year, $33 million deal or so, with something like $14-15 million guaranteed. That would be, to me, put him outside of the market of Seattle. This has really not anything to do with Quandary. It just has to do with kind of a multitude of other factors in this formula. First off, you're not just paying Jamal Adams top of the market money at the safety position. You reset the market at the safety position in the amount that you gave Jamal. Every other safety prior to that was being paid about $500,000 more lump as the next guy up. He went about $1.5 million over the prior guy. So you went substantially above him, above and beyond on Jamal. And you can be mad about that, but the fact of the matter remains is you can't pay $30 million to 2 safeties. You just can't do it with building out the rest of the roster appropriately, especially when you have places you need to address on the roster like offensive line that's just staring you right in the face. I love Quandary, but you factor in the fact you've already put the money into it. You factor in now he's got this injury, which I was saying this, and you can attest to this, Brendan. I was saying we couldn't sign this guy going back months ago because he's going to get older. His best days are probably behind him, and the injury likelihood now goes way up through the roof, as we saw with our own Earl Thomas, who suffered his own, a second broken leg as he got into his early 30s. You put this formula all together in my mind, and I go, I can't really bring him back. Now, this isn't like your Dwayne Brown deal. There's a price that I would go. I'd probably go somewhere in the neighborhood of only like a 3-year, $18 million deal or something. It would be heavily depressed for me to bring him back to maybe where you're in the low 20s. You can maybe modify the deal in the first 2 years of the cap hit to have it down, give him a little bit more bonus money, maybe perhaps, but it would be significantly be about half the value almost of what he's probably going to be able to get on the open market.
Yeah, I'm pretty well in line with that. I will say before the injury, I thought it was possible he would get like 3 years, $40 million.
Yes.
Because of the way the cap goes up. But I think that's a little off the table now. I do think you're looking at 3 for 33, maybe 3 for 36. As for where I would be willing to go, I can't go beyond like 3. I think the highest I could go is 3 for 24. That's pushing it, but you could backload it pretty significantly. You could make it just so those first 2 years, or maybe like
you could put avoidable year. If you did a 3-year deal, if you did a 4th year, then the bonus money, give them a bunch of bonus money, and it ekes out over the 4-year period at that point.
Yeah, that's certainly on the table as well. By the time we get to that 4th year, the cap is probably going to be $8 billion. So who really cares about void money at that point? But yeah, I would probably be willing to go to about 3 for 24. I just can't go higher than that. And you know what? Quandary's played really well the last 2.5 years. He deserves more than that. So I'm cool with him going somewhere else to get it. The only thing I can say, Quandary Diggs' talent is not necessarily something that is coveted by every other team, because not every other team has safeties that play like that. So maybe this turns into like a Chris Carson thing, where the player is clearly good. He shows up to the market when free agency starts and the money's just not there. And maybe then he can come back, but it doesn't strike me as likely.
I think you're onto something because of the fact that the injury thing drives this now. If the injury hadn't occurred, I think the market's so much wider for him and there's more people jump into the fray, but I think that's going to eliminate quite a few.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's Quandary. Okay, next up is Gerald Everett, and this is another pretty interesting one.
Yeah, I want to hear what you think on this one.
So I like Gerald Everett. He had one really bad game here. He had another pretty bad game, the last game. But other than that, I think he was solid. I think a lot of the games where he didn't put up the numbers, Wilson was just not really looking his way. He had that one Washington game where he was our best player on offense, and Wilson overthrew him like 4 or 5 times in that game. He probably would have had 150 yards in that game if Wilson wasn't coming back from the finger still. So I would be okay with keeping Everett, but there are some tight ends on the market who are pretty close to Everett, like Mo Alley Cox, like OJ Howard, like there's 1 or 2 other guys as well that are interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm good with Everett. Initially, I was kind of thinking like maybe you could do like 3 years, 21 million.
Okay.
But what trips me up is Gino Smith last year. If you look at Gino Smith's numbers before last year compared to Gerald Everett to this point, it's very similar. The only difference is Gino Smith was better in the red zone in 2020 with the Titans. And he got 6 years, 50. It was 4 years, 50 million. Now, the Patriots would probably take a mulligan on that contract because he's not even their best tight end.
Yeah.
But that contract gave me pause because the cap went down last year and he still got 12.5 million a year. So I would say on the market, he would probably get something like, I'm going to say 3 years. I'm going to say something like 3 years, 24 million. And I would probably be willing to do that, at least very close.
Yeah, I think the one thing to consider with Gino Smith too is that he might be top 3 in the sport as a blocking tight end as well. So it's a big thing with him that he was bringing to the Patriots with that, in addition to what he was doing as a move tight end for them. Because it's weird that usually the move tight ends aren't as good at blockers. He's not a straight inline guy. And so to have both of those components made him unique. Everett's a willing blocker. I don't think he's as much of a drive type blocker that you get from Jonnu. And that's why, by the way, I think with Jonnu signing that contract, it didn't drive up Everett's market last year because Everett didn't sign his deal before Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith signed his deal before Everett. So if that was sort of setting a market, for a guy that, again, it's apropos of you to make this comparison because they're different players. They're both move tight ends. They're non-inline guys. So if it had kind of driven that market, it should have kind of driven it more than the 1 year. There's a gulf here, right, Brendan? You have a 1 year, $6 million deal that the Seahawks give him. And then you have Jonnu Smith signing, what'd you say it was, a 4 year, 50 million, 4 year, $50 million deal. That's a wide gulf there, right?
Yeah.
And there's something at play there to me that drives that value down league wide, not just to what the Seahawks ended up signing him for. And to think that this season overtook that or changed that just because the cap went up when that seemed to be sort of where teams looked at him. I don't know if there's a more significant increase in his cost. So I still do go probably below 20 million where I stand on this. I do more of a 3 year, $16-17 million deal, give him some bonus maybe. But I wouldn't feel like I've got to drive my value up on him higher than what I really paid last year because the market already kind of dictated what he was.
Yeah, that's fair. The thing is, even though he wasn't perfect this year, it was a career year for him. It was the best numbers he ever put up. And I can't help but notice that Jonnu Smith did not have any 500-yard seasons before he got that contract. I know he's a great blocker. That's true, but I do feel like it would... Hold on,
what doesn't it factor in that you got Derrick Henry running the rock and you throw the ball 20 times a game?
Yeah,
for Jonnu Smith. I mean, that like you only can do it as much as the targets as you get. And I think if you looked at his targets over those years, he's just not. They don't throw.
Yeah, that's very true. But I kind of feel like Everett took the 1 year deal because the cap went down. He didn't want to make his long-term commitment in a year where the cap went down.
Agreed.
He was like, okay, let me kick this can down the road a year. The cap's going up next year probably. And now it has. And I'm going to be able to get my big money in 2022. And he had a good year overall. So I still think that may happen, but you could be right too. I think the Chris Carson thing is a good example for players like Everett who are not the best. They're just good. The market can completely collapse on you out of nowhere.
It just feels like in the NFL right now too, Brendan, I'd be interested you feel the same way. The mid-tier guys have just been really routed out. It's either you got your low-end guys or you got your high-end guys. And these mid-tier contracts are really few and far between in the NFL for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think that is fair, and I think that's all we can say on Everett. So the next one you're going to lead off with Brandon Shell.
I got an easy one here then. Brandon Shell's a guy that they signed, of course, 2 years ago to a 2-year, $8 million deal, a value signing at the time. This was part of the bargain basement dollar store offseason that was 2019, where they had $50 million and just brought in a bunch of also ran type guys. Shell really had his best performance when he first walked in the gate 2 years ago. He got injured that year as it went along. His performance dipped. This year he came in, didn't do really all that good. The Seahawks had Cedric Aboahi pushing him in competition and training camp. Then he went out and played and got injured very semi quickly in this year. Didn't play all that well to my eyes. The Pro Football Focus scores don't kind of back up what I'm saying, where he's been a little bit below league average, probably right near that average to below league average state since he's arrived here. I don't want to pay for that. I feel like I should be able to draft to find below league average. So when it comes to what, I guess first off, what I think that he'll get out in the open market, not a lot. Probably less money than he got this last time. He's going to be 30 years old soon. He's getting into an aging state. So probably he's looking at maybe even in that area of a 1 year, $2 million type deal or something in that range of things. Is there a price I would bring it back for? No, because at the point in time where we stand, I got Jay Curhan as my backup / pushing for starter, and I want to get him competition. So I don't want 3 right tackles on this team. You can't build your roster like that, really. I mean, unless one of them is a swing tackle. Which Brandon Shell is not, and Curhan's not a swing tackle either. So I go with just letting him go at this point. It was fine for a value signing, but there's really not a price past a league minimum deal. I'd say league minimum. If I can bring back for a 1 year, $1 million deal or $1.5 million deal, that's value. I mean, that's I can at least maybe kind of make some peace with that. But my inclination is to let him go.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I do think that first year with Shell, his PFF grade was like 72. So he was a good deal above average then. This most recent year, it kind of got away from him, but I don't think he's a bad player. I'm kind of with you. I do think on the open market, he could get something like, he might get like the $4 million a year that he got with us. He might get another 2-year, $8 million deal, heavily backloaded, and then he never sees most of that money.
Yep.
I just want to do a little bit better if we're going to try to give Curhan the competition, like maybe a Morgan Moses. I don't know how good Morgan Moses is anymore, but where he was a year ago, if he's still there, that's somebody who I think you could bring in to be like the veteran pusher of Curhan.
I like Morgan Moses, and he would fit into the historically what Carroll looks for in the lineman. This thing that we got to think about with this too, I think a little bit, Brendan, and especially in regards to Shell. Shell's into this mold as well, right? The big, huge, massive men, right? That aren't really the greatest of movers. Are they going to make more of a transition now as we go forward to more of the mobile offensive linemen that are supposed to be fitting into Waldron's scheme?
Right.
And that's where Moses struggles a little bit. He's if you look at like his combine going back in history, but again, what wins out here? The Carroll's old mantra of lineman or the new mode of lineman, that can move and do some things in space.
Definitely a valid point. Generally speaking, though, I think the right tackle is somebody who's not on the move as much as a left tackle. So maybe you can get away with it a little bit. But there's only so much you can get away with. We're already trying to get away with Damian Lewis being 330 pounds and waddling around the field. So
yeah, agreed. And an aging Gabe Jackson that's not very mobile, and Posik who's okay in mobility, and we don't know if we're even bringing him back. So Fuller's not mobile, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. In utero, thank you for the $2. We need an athletic center. Yeah, that's I've said this before. I think that's why we passed on Creed Humphrey. Creed Humphrey plays in a phone booth. I don't think we wanted that. I know that still hurts people, but that's kind of what I thought was the thought process behind that. So that's fine, but now you need to go find that athletic center, or else that Creed Humphrey passing up becomes 10 times worse.
Exactly. And yeah, Creed wasn't a great mover in that respect. So if they were looking at that and that was something at the forefront of their thought process, which is fine with me, but kind of because it still hurts. But okay, now go get the athletic center though. Now, oh, go get the athletic lineman now. Don't wait 3 years to get him for the scheme. This is what the Rams run is mobile offensive linemen. You've got to hit your reach blocks. You've got to get down to the second level. You don't have linemen right now that can get that done, and it's elemental to this offense. It's different from what we've had our prior in offense, which is more zone based, and you're just trying to throw as many men at basically the A gap as you can to let your running back just run up over their butts. So you've got to go more this direction. And Kelsey's the guy that stands out there to me, even though he's older than dirt. You want an athletic center, you want a guy that can move. Even at his age, he can move.
Yeah, one of my friends is an Eagles fan, and back in the day when I think it was the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl, he was talking about Kelsey, and he said, in a weird way, Jason Kelsey is kind of like Stephen Curry in that he does things that nobody else can do at his position, and it completely changes the way you have to play when you're playing the Eagles offense. Like there's nobody who can move at the center position like Kelsey. So you signed me up for that.
Yeah, he's 100% right. There is nobody at the center position that moves like Kelsey does, even at his age. I mean, there's a reason his brother is a athletic, mobile tight end, one of the more athletic tight ends you have in the sport, right? Like he's got the same bloodlines running through his veins, and so he's still that guy at that age. Now, the question with him though comes into he's 34 years old, so it's do you want to take the risk, and it's going to cost him money,
Ryan Cobb, thank you for the $2. Day in the life. People keep asking me to do like a vlog video where I do like a day in the life. You guys don't want to see a day in my life. Stop asking me this. I don't. You don't want to see that. Trust me.
I'm not doing no IRL stream. Nope, not me. Yeah, he's right. Brendan's right. You guys, you don't want to see how the sausage is made. Okay, it's
Right.
it's dirty. It's sweaty.
Charles Riley, thank you for the $2. Smother the like button, folks. These two work hard. Appreciate it, Charles Riley.
You're awesome, Charles.
Love having you around. I know you're on both of our channels. I see you all the time on his. I see you on mine. Appreciate it.
Awesome, brother.
Okay, so next up, I'm going to go first with Ethan Posik. This is another relatively easy one. Posik, like the last 2 years, his overall PFF grade is basically league average. I think it's like a 62. But he's just got this really rock bottom reputation where nobody thinks he's good. Nobody likes him. I almost kind of feel bad for him because there's just something there that people don't like.
Yeah.
But I think that there is a reputation that precedes him a little bit. I don't see anybody offering him more than what he got last year, 1 year, $3 million. Now, would I be willing to bring him back for 1 year, $3 million? Yeah, but I don't really want that to be as the starter. But I do think he's worth $3 million. So, okay, sure.
What's he get on the open market?
I think that. I think 1 year, $3 million. I just don't think there's anybody out there who's like, oh yeah, Ethan Posik. Let me get some of that. I just don't see it. Even though the PFF grade's pretty good, even though the stats are pretty good, it just doesn't seem like people have any respect for him. He's Rodney Dangerfield out here.
I think it's a little bit of the problem too when you move him to have him playing guard for his first couple of years, where he plays out of position and looks so miserable playing out of position, looks so lost playing out of position, and it sort of people's first impression sticks with them on a particular player. I'm like you. I actually am relatively okay with him. Even last year, I looked at that contract at a 1 year, $3 million, and for the play he gave, I'm fine with that. What I want to do this offseason, where my priorities lie, is in building this offensive lineup. And you don't just do that with the frontline guys, Brendan. You do that by creating depth within the frontline guys, because we got an extra game now on these football seasons, more time for injuries to pile up, the more of a need for depth. So you bring him back on a 1 year, $3 million deal for me. You bring him in on a 2 year, $6 million deal. And then we get Fuller out the dough. Out the dough. I'm okay with that. That's if that's a spot, because you're building the depth. Now you got Curhan, you got some competition with him. You've got Forsythe. You bring competition over there. You bring it your frontline, a guy ahead of Forsythe. Now you're starting to stack up depth better than you have, say, nothing of the frontline guys you potentially bring in. And now you're going a long way to me to making this offense that much better by doing so.
Yeah, I agree. Some people in the Seahawks fandom, he's kind of like the Trey Flowers of the offense, where everyone thinks he's the worst ever. Yeah, he's just not there. He's just not that bad. He's not good. We got to do better, but I don't mind bringing him back, especially if it means no more Fuller.
Yeah, it would be, and I don't want to be doing. He's our number one guy. We're going to run, but as a backup guy, hey, that's solid. You could do way worse at the center position. You could do Joey Hunt versus an Ethan Posik at the backup center role. I'm rolling with Ethan Posik all day. So I'm perfectly good with it. That's good value to me.
Yeah. Okay, so next up, you're going to lead with this one. This one's kind of fun, but we've already talked about it quite a bit. Rashad Penny.
Rashad Penny. Well, this is, people know me. I'm a long Rashad Penny supporter. So when he went off, it was a thing where it was kind of confirming my biases a little bit on that to a degree. I'm not going to try to go too long-winded with this, because we have talked about this before with this, where I think that his injury situation is different from Chris Carson. I think people like to put them in the same boat, and people go, well, you give Penny a pass on being injury prone, but you don't give Carson a pass. And I always say, well, there's more of an injury history with Carson than there is with Penny. And when you really get into the details of Penny, had one of the most cleanest medical evaluations the Seahawks have ever seen of any college player coming out. We got to think about that. Whereas Carson injured in high school, injured in college, both of them highly injured. And then the ACL, and then the secondary causes of that ACL. Because our reticence with bringing Penny back is the injury stuff, right? We know he's, from a performative level, from a talent level, we know he can get out there and do it. We do all, I think, agree on that. But it becomes a matter of, can he stay healthy or not? And to me, the question of that is, based on the past injury history, is it predictive that I'm probably going to be looking into the future and seeing injuries piling up? With Chris Carson, I can't, because that's every year of his pro career, all of his college career, all of his high school career. With Penny, I just got this recent stuff that's kind of bounced up, really. He's got the broken hand when he first walked in the door, the ACL, and then the fallout injuries from the ACL. I bring him back. I think that he's going to be good to go forward. I do have a price on this. I don't go past 2-year, $10 million. That might be even a little bit higher than most people willing to go. I'm not convinced, though, there isn't somebody who might throw him actually a decent contract, like a 3-year, 16, 17, 18, $19 million deal. Because they think we didn't use him correctly throughout this time frame, which they're not wrong. We've hammered him up the middle continuously when he's an outside runner at his best. They might do that math. They'll do that math with the injury history, like I am, and go, hey, let's throw him this money. This is value. This kid's got upper level talent. The production he put on that field was not just great. It's like, whoa, that made their whole NFL kind of go, whoa, hold on here. How about you?
I kind of like, I don't know if I can go above 2 years, 8 million. I think I granted the difference is so small. Like, should we really grandstand over $1 million when the cap's going to be?
I think it's important to do, Brent. I think you're right. I think that 2 million is still important. That 2 million could be I just mentioned bringing back, almost an Ethan Posik like value guy. So it's important. It's valid as far as hesitancy.
Yeah, but I just don't want to draw a line in the sand at that point if Rashad Penny actually comes back and is good for you, because if you bring him back at like 4 or 5 million a year, he doesn't have to run for 1,500 yards to be worth that money. He doesn't have to play every game. Most running backs don't play every game. It's a very physical position. You're going to miss games almost always.
Yeah.
In fact, I would actually be interested to see how many running backs actually did play in every game last season. I would say the list is probably very, very small.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say 2 for 8. If it's 2 for 10, I'm going to be a little uncomfortable, but I'm not going to be diametrically opposed to it. But I would say 2 for 8. And on the open market, I just don't know if I see him getting too much more than that. He could get 2 for 10, but from somebody like, I think the Falcons, there's a team that supposedly is going to be a little interested because they need some running back assistance.
Yeah, they do.
But other than that, I just don't know if I see it. I think his reputation is still that he beat up on a bunch of really bad teams at the end of the season. And I don't know if it goes too far beyond that.
It's an unusual free agent situation, isn't it? I mean, this is really an odd one with this kind of player because of how hard it is to kind of ascertain what the value will be just with the injuries and the production being so sudden and so explosive, along with it occurring, to your point, against somewhat of lesser competition. It makes it harder to kind of understand where it'll kind of all shake out.
Okay, so moving on to the next one. I think that's all we got about Penny. Al Woods, I'll go first here. He's about to turn 35. Had a real good year for us, but it's not like his particular talents combined with his age are going to get the market warm. I don't think teams are lining up going, oh, we got to give this 35-year-old one tech a bunch of money. You might be able to get him for about the same that you got in 2021, which was 1 year, 3 million. Maybe it goes up a little bit just because he had such a good year and the cap went up. But I don't think you're going to have to go past 1 year. I know that because he's old, and older players tend to understand that the long-term money's not going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing for me is that Puna needs to move back to one tech, clearly, right?
Right.
So there are only so many snaps you have for an Al Woods, who is also a one tech. But I would probably be willing to go 1 year, $4 million, because he is good. He is definitely good. Past that, I'm thinking to myself, how much money can I really afford to have invested in the one tech?
Are you planning within your plan on that, theoretically addressing the 3 tech then somewhere in another neighborhood in the offseason as far as free agency or the draft?
You have to. We don't really have any 3 techs on this roster right now, except for LJ Collier and Robert Kimdichie.
Yeah. No, I know. I think LJ is going to be bye this offseason. So I'm kind of with you on that. I think I don't think I'd go past the 3 million he got last year. Basically, I think I'd be still staying on that realm. Even the 4 million, like you mentioned with your $2 million difference, I can't go that one extra million higher for the guy who is a one tech, who was outstanding. This year is a little bit of an outlier year for his career as far as production goes. He's not this good throughout, and so I'm a little bit hesitant when a guy's 34 years old and puts up a career year to be like, okay, I'm going to go beyond that. You do have a one tech problem too. I don't think Brian Monet is a pure free agent this offseason. I guess they do have him. Yeah, he's a restricted free agent.
Yeah, he's a RFA.
So you've got a one tech problem on this team right now, right? We got a one tech problem, and not that you don't have any one techs, but that you have too many one techs. You only are going to carry at any point in time on this roster 3 defensive tackles. Carroll's history of 10 years, 99% of the time, you've had 3 active defensive tackles active on game day. Right. Mm-hmm. So you're just having a fourth is kind of not really going to make a lot of sense. So with 3 one techs on the roster right now, you got to dial back one and then fill them in with a 3 tech. And to me, that's naturally a little bit Al Woods because of the fact you have club control under Puna Ford and Brian Monet. And then you can just add in the 3 tech easily at that point, and it all is well and good. With that said, though, his play was outstanding this year. He was maybe our best defensive player. He was he was kind of a wrecking force at times. So I would probably be open to doing the 1-3, but I won't go past that. That is where, because I'd rather implement my other plan of bringing in the 3 tech, going 3 with that, keeping it low end. I'm already paying Puna some money there, kind of lighten some things up, especially if I can put the extra money and assets into the defensive end.
Yeah, I think that's all pretty fair. You could, I know he's an RFA, but you could just let Monet go. Mm-hmm. It's not like Monet's done anything to like overwhelm me with like, oh yeah, this guy's worth keeping around. Even for $1 million, I don't know if I see very much with him. He had like 2 good games where he had 2 pressures, and other than that, he was just a jag.
Yeah, if it comes down to the RFA on Monet, and I don't know what it is, maybe you can speak to this, exactly how much it is, but if it's 1.6 versus Al Woods at 1.3, I'll take the Al Woods at 1.3 then. No mm-hmm. doubt about it. If it's at 1 million with Puna or with Brian Monet, if it's lower into that area on the RFA, I might lean in the other direction. But that'd be the key for me as to what his cost is going to be on that. Because that tag goes up and down with guys in different places. And sometimes it's like based on your prior playing time as to what you have then applied to as far as the type of tag that's applied. Those restricted tags are a little bit funky.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next up, you got a pretty fun one here. It is Sidney Jones.
Sidney Jones, of course, the guy that's famous, UW guy, famous for tearing, I believe it was his Achilles on his pro day just before the draft. He was going to be a first-round pick, ended up being a second-round pick, went to the Eagles, and struggled to come along from that injury. Never really was able to tap in with them. Went to the Jaguars, did okay with them, finally came to us, was rough through his first 2 games, looked very Trey Flowers-like through his first couple of games, and then really took off as the year went along. Looked really, really comfortable the more he got time in this defense. I think the thing that stands out to me more than anything else with this guy is that you look at his Pro Football Focus rankings, the eye test. He seems to be getting every year a little bit better as he's gone along in the pros. Not just because maybe he's learning the sport more, but because maybe he's the further he gets from that Achilles injury, the more he has now to get himself back to where he was somewhat athletically before the injury. And the kid is still only 25 years old right now, going to be 26. So it's not an older player here. Mm-hmm. I would be willing to give him a deal. Some of what I would give him might be really connected to what happens with DJ Reed and whether DJ goes out the door or does not. And that if DJ Reed, for instance, goes out the door, that might dictate that I might increase my my willingness to pay him a little bit more, just to get a little more solidified there. But I'd love to bring him back in at a 1 year, $3 million deal. That would be, to me, an ideal. Again, I'd go even a 2 year. I might go a 2 year, $7 million deal or something, if he's willing to do that. But that would be probably still in the low end of things. But I would give him a couple million. I thought he played really good football, and there was times where I thought he was eye-opening in some of his ability to break on the ball, that we don't often see with all the corners that have come through here recently, especially Brendan in the last 5 years.
Yeah. So Sidney Jones really came along. When I say he got better in every game he played, that's not just some dumb cliche. It literally was. His PFF grade got better every game he played. He improved, I think, with every single game, all the way up to that last game where he and DJ Reed both played fantastic. I think PFF was drooling all over themselves for them. And Sidney Jones was a guy who went in the second round, so he's got a pedigree. He's not some UDFA nobody like a Brandon Browner, so it makes sense to me that there might be some interest in him. It would not surprise me if somebody offered him like 2 years, $8 million, and I would be willing to do that because I think he's a good fit for Carroll's defense. I think he has an opportunity to really earn that money and then some over the next 2 years because he's still young enough to where he could be developing. So I would say on the open market, he could probably fetch like 2 years, $8 million, and I'm willing to match that to keep him around. And he played college football here, so he should be pretty excited to stick around if the opportunity's there, honestly.
Agreed. And we got to remember too, he is only a zone-based corner, which I agree to you. I think there will be a team that will give him potentially like that market rate, but that because he is only a zone-based corner, that does reduce down the market a little bit, removing those man-based cover teams from the fray on it. He is, I think, even beyond good. He's almost gets very close to being a perfect like fit for Carroll's defense and what he looks for ideally at the corner position. Zone-based understanding, able to read the quarterback's eyes, able to route read in order to know when he can jump on the ball, when he can't, still stay safe over the top, a good tackler, tall, long, rangy. I think these things fit to what Carroll likes as his model at cornerback. So I'd be very enthused to hear that we're bringing back Sidney Jones, especially if we can get him on a little bit of a lower end contract, because I think that'll be a value contract going forward for us.
Right. And I think that's about it on Sidney. We're both pretty on board with keeping him as long as nobody offers him like, I don't know, 15 million plus, which why would anybody?
Do you go, okay, let me give you this. 3 years, 15.
I might still do it. I might have to think about it because the thing is, we had no pass rush last year, and he still played well. He could be a lot better than what we're seeing, but I don't. Is anybody going to offer that?
The cap's going up. You've been on this a little bit more than I have on this show, and you're probably smarter for being on it where you're putting your numbers because the cap's going up, and you're going up from 182 to 208. So not just 10%, it's going up. And a lot of teams cleared off a lot of dead space last year that they were forced to clear off because of how perilous their cap situation was. So this to me just maybe somebody there's some smarter organizations out there, that look at things in a way where they can go and extrapolate like we kind of are a little bit with this and go, well, yeah, we get him at $5 million a year on 2 or 3 year deal. That's amazing value for a cornerback playing it at slightly above average level.
Yeah. And you shove a lot of that money into the third year and make it so you cut him after 2 and he never sees most of that money. You're probably actually only going to end up paying him like $3.5 million a year for those first 2 years.
That's right.
And then maybe a little bit of dead money, but he's not going to see a lot of that money, even if you do it. So I guess I would be willing to do it because I do think he's really impressed me, but I don't know if that kind of money is going to be there. He was regarded as a bust in Philadelphia. He was.
He was.
And
what did he cost us? Like, what was it, a 6th round pick for him that we traded, something like that? So, I mean, it's again, it's about how much can your reputation turn around so much significantly in just, one good season of play. But I'm with you. I do it too. 315, I'd still do it too, and just try to find a way to work the money around a bit.
Okay, so I think I'm going to skip Gino Smith because, I mean, even if we do bring Gino back, there's nothing to talk about. It's going to be 1 year, $1.12 million, which is the veteran minimum. There's no reason to give him any more than that. Like, there's nothing to discuss there. And I don't think at this point we'll bring him back. But if we did, 1.12.
Is there any, just the one question I'd ask you with this, because it's less about Gino and more of the backup quarterback position. Maybe I asked you this last week. I can't remember what your answer was. Are you willing to do a quarterback pick 1 through 3? Or do you feel like because we're in the go for mode now, we can't waste one of our top 2 picks, and we have 2 picks in the top 3 rounds? We couldn't put that on a quarterback.
To me, it just doesn't make any sense. If you're going to keep Wilson, then actually try to win with him. Don't keep him just to keep him. Like,
Yeah.
this is not we're not collecting G.I. Joes here. We don't want to have the Russell Wilson G.I. Joe just so we can say, hey, we got this cool G.I. Joe. We're not going to do anything with it. I will say a couple people in my stream chat lately have been getting excited over Carson Strong in the second round, the Nevada quarterback, but I'm just not feeling it. I'm just not feeling it.
I think he goes high 1 too. You get the 5th-year option on these quarterbacks, which draws up some of the guys in the top of the first, even if they aren't to go there. Like Teddy Bridgewater went, and when remember the Vikings picked him. So I can't think that Carson's going to last into the second round. But I'm with you. I just don't waste these picks towards quarterback right now, and then don't do it if you're keeping Wilson to piss him off for into the year as well.
Mm-hmm. Charles Riley, thank you for the $5. Boys, Herbicide 73 thinks we can get Buckner off the Colts for a third round pick. Sorry. Your thoughts. He also thinks Jamal Adams is really good as reference. Well, we definitely can't get Buckner for a third round pick.
No.
I'm gonna put a stop to that right now. I don't even know if you could get Buckner for a second round pick. I don't think so.
No, because when the Colts traded for Buckner from the 49ers, which was only 2 years ago, they signed him to a big monster contract, which means that I believe he just finished through the second year of his contract this year. So they'd have to eat 2 years of what's remaining on his bonus money, which means, if I'm not mistaken, they're probably going to have to actually eat money to move off from him. Which means that you, as the team trading for him, is going to have to give up a little bit extra assets for them to have to take that hit in the wallet, or hit in the, in the way that they do. So why would the Colts want to do that for a guy who's been very effective for them since he's walked in the door?
And that Colts team is a little bit all in because they traded for Wentz. I know obviously that isn't working out great, but it feels like they're trying to win now.
It does indeed. Yeah, they've got a roster that can win. They just need better to your point, better quarterback play. And they probably need to get a couple other things done as well, too. I thought this last offseason, they were tremendously conservative when they had money to spend, and they didn't do a whole lot. And they really could have, I thought, amped up their team like the New England Patriots did. They didn't do the equivalent. They're one of those teams a little bit like us, where it's like they stay in their process, and they go, get out of your process. You've got a smart process. Nobody's arguing that. Sometimes you just leave it a little bit. Just go a little bit outside of your comfort zone a little bit,
I would take the Colts process over our process at this point, though. I think
they've got a better they've got a better drafting track record and spending money track record. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, I have to take a big L here. I did not like Jonathan Taylor in the draft at all. He was linked to the Seahawks, and I was like, no, thank you. I got to take an L on that one because he's great.
The only reason I liked him with it was because Wisconsin ran over the A gap 99% of the time, and Coach Carroll loves running over the A gap 99% of the time. And I was like, well, here you go, Carroll. Here's one of you have this type you like, which is the Marshawn Lynch type that does this one thing that you want to do over and over again, and he's good at it. Have at it, go crazy with it. But I also wasn't necessarily with him going, that's all. He didn't have a lot he did outside of, it was literally, Brendan, that's all he did with Wisconsin. It was just right up over the middle every single. He was amazing at it. He was amazing, but you just go, okay, how's that going to translate to the pros? Just running up over the back of the center every single time. You got to do more than that at the NFL level. And, he's been able to do that. He's been able to do more at the NFL level, though, again, they do tend to still just hammer him over the middle here, even with the Colts.
Right. Okay. So I guess next up would be Alex Collins. So Spotrac actually has a market value tracker for Alex Collins. I think that's a resource they could have better spent on a player who actually is like relevant in the NFL. So that's weird. But they basically have him making a hair more than the veteran minimum would be for him. They have him at 1 year, 1.2 million. And I think the minimum for him is like 1.035 million.
Okay.
And I don't know. There isn't a whole lot to talk about here. If you bring him back, it's going to be in that range of like 1 million to 1.5 million. I guess the question is, do you even want to bring him back for that?
No.
I mean, he's good, but man, he got hurt and he never got back on his feet. He never was able to. He had one good game in Pittsburgh and then nothing really. So I don't know.
To me, it's just address it with the draft, especially if like Carol's talking about Carson coming back next year. If we sign Penny, you can't put three guys that have been injured recently, then that backfield with two guys in Homer and Dallas that really are only going to be third down type backs for you. That to me eliminates it a bit. You just go out there and draft him, go cheaper, get a guy in here for $500,000 who's probably just as good, if not has a little more better potential than what Alex does on the field, and call it a day. You know.
Yeah, okay. I think we're pretty in agreement on that. I'll say this. There were some people in the Seahawks fandom who loved Alex Collins after those first few games, but yeah, he got hurt, and I think a lot of the shine is off that apple.
I think he's a fun runner to watch too for people because he does the river dance stuff and all of his moves out there, and he can juke a guy in open space and it looks cool. But I mean, it comes down to durability's got to be a factor as we go forward because our running back room has been decimated for about 6 straight years. And if you stack a whole bunch of bodies that are injury prone or have been injured at a high rate in the past, good chance they're going to be injured as we go into the future.
Mm-hmm. Charles Riley, thank you for the $5. Brendan, I was a fool as well. John Taylor was totally attached to the Hawks in that draft, and I was scared they would pick him. Egg on face. Yeah, he was my number one stay away from guy in that draft, I remember, because we kept getting attached to him, and I was like, I don't want another running back, especially not one who only runs up the gut. But it worked. Hey, if it wasn't for the QB thing in the NFL, he might be the MVP this year. So there you go.
You're also being affected by the fact they just drafted Rashad Penny in the first round, and that was turning into an utter failure at that moment as well. I'm
right.
sure, probably.
All right. So, any objection to us skipping Kyle Fuller because everybody knows what we're going to say there? Okay, let's go to, why don't you take this one, Ryan Neal, and he is a UFA, so he's not restricted. He can go wherever he wants. What do you think?
Ryan Neal's been a pretty effective player for us in last year. A nose for the ball, kind of a jack of all trades kind of guy, master of none a little bit, though not even a jack of all trades, kind of semi jack of all trades, I guess. 26 years old, still relatively young. I'd like to bring him back, but to me, I'm not giving him a lot of money to do so. I might bring him back on a 1-year, $2 million deal because he gives me depth at both safety and cornerback, which is a little two birds for one stone signing. I like that part of it. I don't think I would go beyond that. I don't think there's going to be any team that's going to be in the league willing to go beyond that. I mean, even $2 million might be a little rich. He's really, when you look at his PFF and being not just the PFF score, but when specifically the thing that jumps out to me is his targets versus receptions allowed. And he has a high rate of receptions allowed on targets when he's in coverage. There was a play that George Kittle absolutely showed him on this year on a simple drag route that I thought was pretty eye-opening. I like it, Ryan Neal. Don't hate him, but that'd be the top that I'd go with it on that, Brendan.
Yeah, I think the minimum he can get paid this year would be $965,000. So he's not quite at the million marker. You might be able to bring him back for that. It might just be the $965K.
Yeah.
And for that, sure. I don't think he's really a safety, though. He can do it, but I don't think that's his natural position. I think his natural position is corner.
Agreed. And I think as a dime corner too, I would say on that. Like you'd have him as basically your dime, and then if you got to bring him in to do safety to fill in, he can do some of that. But that's his role.
Yeah, and I don't think he gets offered more than like $1.5 million, and I'm happy to keep him around for $1.5 million. I don't think he does that much on special teams either, so that's another area where he's not really adding value to my knowledge. Nope. So yeah, I would go with that. Byron D, thank you for the $1.99. How many draft picks we have and what we draft in? I think we have 6 draft picks because we've lost the Jamal one, we lost the Sidney Jones one, but we have an extra 4th rounder from the Jamal trade.
Correct.
As for what we draft in, that depends on what we do in free agency. So we're going to get to that. This is a process. You can't take your first step and then take your 17th step. You got to take your second step, then your third step. It's like a workout plan, guys. You got to put one foot in front of the other.
Predicting draft picks at this point, just to Brendan's point, it's what's your re-signings, then what free agency, then you get to the draft, and we'd all love them to pick the best player available in the draft, as though just get the guy that fits, but they're going to pick for needs like just about every other team in the NFL ends up picking for needs once you get to draft time.
Okay, next up we have Rasheen Green. This is another kind of fun one because some people like this dude. So Rasheen Green kind of broke out in the second half of the season last year. He got a lot of QB pressures. He had like 6.5 sack, or I think 5.5 of them were in the second half of the year. He also returned a blocked extra point for a touchdown, which was one of the coolest plays of the year, I guess. So maybe people know his name from that. I don't know. But this is a guy who was a top 100 draft pick, so he does have a little bit of pedigree. He is still really young. I think he's younger than Darrell Taylor. He might, yeah,
24.7.
Yeah, I think he's still young, but I don't know. I think somebody will give him something like 3 years, 15 million. I'm not really close to that. I'm not that interested in Rasheen Green. I would give him like the veteran minimum, which for him would be like $1 million. I can't go higher than that. He's just not exciting to me.
Nope,
That's all I got.
Me neither, but I think you are right. One of those teams is going to look at his age. He's only turning 25 this year. They're going to say, oh, well, he's just putting it together now. And then they're going to look back at that draft pedigree that you talked about, where he was not only a top 100, but he was a guy that was widely considered that if he came back to college for an extra year, didn't come out that year early and put the production back on the field that next year, he would have been a top 15 pick with his physical pedigree. So he had, there's those people that were also thinking about those NFL circles who will be thinking about that maybe now as they're looking at him and his development and what he put on this tape this year at the end. I'm with you. I don't go past a minimum veteran deal. He showed me nowhere near any sort of consistent pass rush. If you look at his 6.5 sacks in production this year, it's also culminated at the same time that he's had the most snaps in his entire career as well. I think that he's not a very efficient pass rusher. He's a guy you give him 650 snaps, 500 snaps, whatever, he's going to get you a handful of sacks, but that doesn't mean he's being productive. That doesn't mean he's pushing quarterbacks off their spot. Doesn't mean he has a high pass rush win rate. I bet if we were to look at that, Brendan, he's probably down in like 4%, 3%. It's pretty minuscule. I would gather to guess. So I'm with you. Veteran minimum deal.
All right, and I think that's really all we can say about Rasheen. We're both not fans. I know some people in the chat like him, but I want to try to do a little bit better, and there are only so many spots on that defensive line. I don't want him taking snaps away from somebody who could be better.
That's right. 100%.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next up is restricted free agent Blessuan Austin. Now, because he's restricted, I believe that the tender we can offer him would be 1 year, 1.9 million, and if anybody tops that, they give us a 6th round pick in the upcoming draft. Right. So with that in mind, are you offering him that tender?
I'd get cold-blooded about this, Brendan. This is where I'm a little naughty. Okay. I'll be a little naughty with this. I might have done this last year, frankly, with Trey Flowers too. I'll give him the restricted tag, but when you put a restricted tag, it doesn't guarantee the contract. So you can release them at any point in time. But I put the restricted tag on him as insurance for depth. I want to address the cornerback position this offseason. I'd like to do it in the draft. I don't know if that's the free agency is going to play out to allow me that. I don't know what's going to happen with DJ Reed. I don't know what's going to happen with Sidney Jones. So with those question marks, let's get some certainty back in the room for the moment. And if I got to clear $2 million off the cap downstream, down in July, down in August, so be it. I'm willing to do it at that point in time once I know I have my cornerback, my cornerback depth more solidified.
Yeah. I don't see anybody offering the $2 million to give us a 6th round pick for Blessuan Austin, by the way. So I'm not really thinking about that too much.
No, that won't happen.
But I'm willing to give him the tender just to hang around in training camp and see what's up. And then you hopefully have your cornerback room sorted out. But it's possible it isn't. DJ Reed's a free agent. Sidney Jones is a free agent. Trey Brown, we don't know if he's going to play week 1 this year. John Reed is a free agent while we're at it. So I think it makes sense to slap the tender on him and see what happens. Yep. So I would do that. Charles Riley, thank you for the $5. Brendan, a lot of us in chat are hoping the Nightbot is a companion robot designed for pleasure and minuscule tasks around the house. Any truth to this? No, Nightbot is an account that probably most of you have blocked because he just pops up in my chat every now and then to tell you to hit the subscribe button every now and then. But he does not do anything for your pleasure. He's only here for your pain. Okay. Next up, similar situation to Austin would be Brian Monet, except because he was a UDFA There is no compensation if somebody picks him up. So you can tender him for 1 year, 1.9 million, and then if somebody wants to top that offer, then they can top it, and there's nothing you can really do about it. So I would not bring back Monet, because if you've already got Puna and you've already got Al Woods, that's too much money into one tech as is, arguably. But I know Carroll values his run defense, so I respect that. But I cannot bring Monet back on top of that unless he wants to be on the practice squad, which I don't even know if he can still be on the practice squad at this point.
I'm not sure either on that one. And I'm with you. To me, it's like we were talking about earlier on this one. It's in him or Al Woods kind of question for me. It's one of the two on that one. If no Al Woods, then fine. 1.9, we're bringing him back as a backup one tech to Puna. Hopefully, at that point, then so be it. I'm fine with that at that point, but not both. I'm not going to go 5 million between Al Woods and Brian Monet. No, can't do that.
All right, so that's Brian Monet. Next up, you're going to lead with this one, ERFA Penny Hart.
Penny Hart's a guy that he can do some fly sweep stuff. He's supposed to be pretty fast. Doesn't do a whole lot for me. The wide receiver room is one, especially when we're talking about the 4th and 5th wide receiver on this roster. I would like to improve it. We've been very lucky with the health of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett the last couple of years. I don't know if that's going to hold up into the future. We're going to probably have to get a little more depth at the wide receiver position. To me, Penny Hart, you mentioned Jag a lot. This to me is he's even a little bit below a Jag. He's not even to me a Freddie Swain, really. I don't have any. He's he's a restricted free agent. I believe this is one we can re-sign and have club control over. But there's no real interest on my part in bringing him back. I'd rather see what you have in Cade Johnson or the kid from UW. Just doesn't do much for me on this one. I'm a no on this all the way around.
Yeah, he's actually a exclusive rights free agent. So if we decide to slap the tag on him, he can't go anywhere and no other team can get him. Like it's done. And it would only be $900,000. For $900,000, I'll bring back Penny Hart. I think he probably does $900,000 worth of work, but it obviously doesn't really matter at this point. This is another one where it's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I will say Penny Hart's a guy who gets hyped up in training camp pretty much every year, and then you never really see anything happen when the season starts. So I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe you let him go, and then when nobody else picks him up, you bring him back to the practice squad. Maybe that would be the idea.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I just don't want to. It's as much to me just that they talk them. Sometimes they bring back guys like this. They'll say, "Okay, our receiving crew is good because we got the," and they mention this guy's name, or they'll mention phrase. Like, stop mentioning those guys' names. I want those are not your excellent back end additions to your receiver room. You need to do better than that a little bit. I'm not asking for stars, but this guy's an undrafted free agent, try hard, overachiever, whatever you want to apply. Let's go bigger than that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next up, another ERFA, probably in a similar boat, would be John Reed, the cornerback. Still, I think he's about to turn 26, and he would only be due a 1 year 900. I think maybe not even 900,000. It might actually just be like 830,000 or something. What would you do there?
All day yes on this one. I thought he played pretty well for what I saw. They put him on the outside. He's really a slot guy, but he excelled really decently for us on the outside. He didn't get picked on to death or anything like that. He was feisty. He was competitive. I liked what I saw out of John. He's nowhere near their typical what they look for in size and length goes. But again, neither of us, I think, Brendan, this year have been all that impressed by what we've seen out of Ugo Amadi this season. And so I look at him and I go, okay, there's some competition for Ugo next year. When we don't need to put him on the outside, now he can press Ugo a little bit.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking to get some competition in for Ugo because he's not a bad player, I know, but I'm certainly not excited about it. Okay,
Agreed.
and I would probably do that too. Just bring him back. I think the cost would be about $830,000. It might be 900, but it doesn't really matter that much. He's worth keeping around, and I think did we trade for him and then cut him, or did we trade for? Yeah, okay.
we did that dirty thing, right? Where you trade for him for a pick, and if he's on the roster by a certain point, then you have to give up the draft pick. But if you release him and then re-sign him back the next week, you don't have to give up the draft pick. It's one of those deals,
right? Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, so you take the next one, And this one, kind of a fan favorite in Seattle, although I don't know if that's true anymore. We got Will Dissly. What you doing?
Will Dissly. I would say Will Dissly, a little bit of this is going to be probably driven by what goes on with the Gerald Everett situation. And I think the Gerald Everett domino first has to fall before I can make a decision on the Dissly domino. I like the thought process of bringing Dissly back. I would even be open to bringing Dissly and Everett back. Though I'm not really looking to give him a whole lot, though. I feel like Dissly, since he came back from that second injury the last couple of years, he's been available and out in the field for the most part. He's still been a very good blocker, but I don't think he's the same kind of dynamic down the field guy that he was, and the ability to break tackles like he was. Maybe it's just that they're just not targeting him very much, but it just doesn't seem the same player coming back off those injuries. So I land at probably going, I'd bring him back probably $1.5 million. I'd go above the veteran minimum on it, maybe a little bit, just to try to solidify him for what he can bring in the blocking game. Maybe even I go a little bit beyond that, because I think it's important to have a good blocking tight end in this offense. And though Colby impressed me in that respect this year, I think Dissly's still better. So that'd be about where I'd want to do on a 1-year deal. I don't think I'd want to go much past that. Maybe like a 2-year, $4 million deal, something like that. I don't think he's going to get any money on the market because there is that injury history. And again, just who's going to pay big money to a tight end that's really more of the blocker at this point than anything else, especially because, as you mentioned earlier, there's so many tight ends that are going to be available on the market this offseason, from OJ Howard to David Njoku and on down the line, say nothing of guys that might be released in addition to that, like an Evan Ingram type. So I that's where I would stand. 1 year, 1.5, 2 year, $4 million.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if Dissly was like ended up not getting anything and came back for like the veteran minimum. He spent his whole life in the state of Washington. I think he was a high schooler, college. Now he's here. There's nothing there that would make anybody really want to pay him. It's not like he's one of the best blockers in the league at tight end. He's good.
Yeah.
And his hands are good, and he catches a pass or two a game. I think that's fine. You can easily bring back Everett and Dissly. Dissly is not somebody who's thinking, oh, I'm going to go be a number one tight end somewhere. I'm going to go be an 800-yard receiver. No, that's not him anymore. Maybe once upon a time it was, but it's not anymore. So, yeah, I would bring back Dissly. I don't think you're going to have to give him any more than the $1.03 million. I would be willing to go up to I might be willing to go to 1 year, 1.7 or 1.8, but I don't think you're going to have to. I think he's probably just a guy who's happy to be here.
You might be right on that. It wouldn't surprise me if the market was really tepid for him when it's all said and done. So and to your point on this, Pro Football Focus didn't really like his game this year. There was a lot of, when I was looking at the numbers weekly basis, he'd be in the bottom end rankings, offensively speaking. So I think that's going to also be very well aware across the league as to where he's at with that. And that includes blocking, to your point. It wasn't an amazing blocker this year. He was good, not amazing. In that element of things. So,
yeah. A couple people in the chat are pointing out that Dissly is from Montana, but Montana is not a real state. It doesn't actually exist, so he's actually here. So
yeah, that's right. It's all the same in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay, so this is the last big one coming up here. This is the last really interesting one. Man, this guy made peanuts this year. We got DJ Reed, cornerback extraordinaire, made less than $700,000 in 2021. So he wants that bag, and he could probably get that bag. So he only had 2 interceptions, and they came against Tim Boyle. So adjusted for inflation, it's really just like 1.2 interceptions. But his coverage numbers are really good, and he was on a team with no pass rush. Like Sidney Jones, I think that counts for something. He allowed less than 50% completion in coverage, despite having no pass rush to work with and being the number 1 corner. And by the way, he played 3 games out of position, the first 3 games of the year. So I think if he hits the market, somebody would give him something like 3 years, $30 million. I think he's a little too small to be one of the big time paid guys, but I think he can get that 3 years, 30, maybe even 3 for 33. Yeah. I cannot go there with him if I'm completely wrong about his value, because he's got, he's not a blue chipper. He doesn't have a high pedigree, and he ends up going for something like 3 years, 20. then I'm kind of willing to go for it, but I can't really go higher than that. What do you got?
We're in lockstep on this one. I do think, to your point on this, 3 years, 33, 3 years, 30 million seems about right. A little bit less than what Shaq got on average, but still, some of his coverage scores should be better than what Shaq was showing last year coming out of Seattle. I know they were, in fact. Shaq got picked on in just about every game he played. I know he didn't have these kind of stellar efforts that we've seen out of DJ Reed, but Shaq had the size. Shaq's got the speed. Shaq's got more of the draft pedigree. So I agree with you. I would stay into that more of that lane of a 3-year, $20-ish million deal. It might even go a couple million more over the top of that, and call it good. I do come back to some of just my hankering here, or my instincts on this, Brendan, are that this defense, it is as it's most successful when the front four is getting the work done. So if you're going to put work in this defense, go front to back rather than back to front. And paying into DJ, paying into Quandary, paying into Jamal is doing the opposite of that. You're going back to front. And I just think there's some defenses that work that way. This is not a defense that works that way, in my opinion. And we've undersold our defensive line for so long. We've got to invest in that. And in my opinion, doing it at the same time is trying to reinvest in your offensive line heavily. And I think there's only so much you can do in an off season. And if we're talking about paying that money out there, we're 11, 12 million going to your cornerback now, after you got 17 and a half going to your safety. And God knows if they potentially bring back Quandary, how much money's left over at that point to build into that defensive line, to add those extra rushers we so desperately need. It makes this defense go. You mentioned Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley blitzed the least amount because he comes from the Carroll roots of things. Carroll does not want to blitz. The front four's got to get it done. They got to. It's absolutely intrinsic to this defense. So I'd follow along with you. That the 20 million is it. That's my 22, maybe 22 is about my line.
Yeah. Again, I don't think you need to grandstand over a little bit of money when you can backload it and then cut them before they get to that point so easily.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel the need. If it's 3 for 22, I'm not going to be like, oh no, we broke my line in the sand. I'm not going to be throwing a fit here.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to just make sure they don't see most of that money and you don't end up having to pay them almost any of that. And even if you do, if you bring him back on a 3-year deal, you win a Super Bowl in those first 2 years. And then the third year, you have to pay him a bunch of money when he's maybe isn't even that good anymore. Who cares? You won a Super Bowl with his help. So yeah. These are just kind of more guidelines rather than anything super hard, but it is tough because if you don't bring back DJ Reed, what do you do at the cornerback spot? Because Sidney Jones, I like, but I don't know if he's a number one. I don't know if he's there. And Trey Brown, maybe he can be a number one, but we don't know what we're doing. So do we spend draft capital on one? I don't want to do that. Do we bring in a free agent? Isn't that kind of just the same problem as paying DJ? It is kind of hard to figure out what you're going to do, but I just can't do it.
Well, and unfortunately, Brendan, there's a little bit of where we're sort of experimenting here on my theory to take this track. It would be great if we could have more of a baseline to say, look at what's happened here in 2017 when we invested in the defensive pass rush and we really got that out and the corner plays were able to do so much better because of that. We don't have that baseline because unfortunately in recent years, they've always gone just good enough with the pass rush, right? Where they go, okay, we lose Frank Clark. Let's go get Ziggy Ansah and LJ Collier. It's like that kind of wash, rinse, repeat we've seen over and over again. So my theory here that I'm proposing to say that get the front four ferocious and vicious and hunting, and that will make everything else in the back end. That's my instinct on this, is that Carroll's defense and his corners in particular can make do with being lesser, can make do with not being the best of the best. But he's got to make sure that he's putting his attention into that front four to get that done. And if he doesn't, and then he runs with those guys like that, they will get exposed. They will. And so it is wholly reliant on him investing in that defensive line to get it done. But if he does it, I think you can go lighter, Brendan, at the corner position at that point. I think you get away with it at that point.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. You can't spend big at every position. To me, it just makes way more sense to spend big on the line and cheap out at the defensive back spot. We tried to do the opposite in 2020 when we had Shaq, Dunbar, Blair, Amadi, Jamal, Quandary, and it was terrible. It was terrible until we got Dunlap.
Yeah.
So to me, that needs to be a lesson.
Yeah.
Tom Cox, thank you for the $5. What offensive lineman would you trade up for in the draft? I was a big Daniel Falalele fan, but at this point, I don't think that's the best use of resources because he's a right tackle. If you're going to trade up in the draft for an offensive lineman, I kind of feel like this draft, it should probably be a center. There's the Lindenbaum guy, but he might go top 10. I don't know. I've heard some amazing things about him. To be clear, I want a left tackle in free agency. I don't want a rookie left tackle. He's going to get Wilson killed. But yeah, I would trade up for maybe Lindenbaum, I think his name is, and maybe one or two other centers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Brendan on this. The center you grabbed the one I was going to suggest, which was Lindenbaum, the center. I agree with you. There's a lot of talk of him going up in top 10. Though let's see. These centers always seem to drop into the back teens to the early 20s, even on the guys that get highly rated, that are even super clean prospects. It just does tend to be where they do line up on. But he would be the one guy I would look at. If we're talking about having to get up in the top 10 to get Linderbaum anyway, well, then hell with it. Let's go get Cross or Leal at that point. Like, what's the one more little bit extra value than to jump up 5 more slots to go get your purified left tackle, Brendan? Because like you, I would like to go with the free agent tackle, the Teron Armstead type. But if there's a trade to be made to where you could get the left tackle of future in this draft, those guys are very clean. Leal, Cross. There might be one other guy that are very, very clean left tackles coming out. They will be good. They will be. And every year in the draft, there are these guys, right, Brad? There's usually a couple of the top left tackles in the draft that if you're picking up in the top 13, 12, I always talk about the tiers. You're in that tier 1 area of the top 12, 13 picks, and you're getting your guy. You're on pretty solid, stable ground of the guy you're getting, especially for a tackle type position that just doesn't have the kind of bust rate it once did, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. But unfortunately, that conversation starts with us trading up in the draft, and we all know that's just not going to happen, people.
It's exercise in futility here on this one.
Charles Riley, thank you for the $10. Brendo and Brando, I know firing the DC is next to nothing, but given their horrific starts to the last 2 seasons, do you think research was done by a firm and this was a positive upon analysis? I don't know if there was research done by a firm, but I will say this. One of the theories is that Ken Norton, the last 2 years, was making a lot of mistakes. Pete had to step in mid-season to clean it up, and he got sick of doing that, and that's what caused this firing. So that may have something to do with it. Maybe you will see a better start in 2022.
Yeah, I don't think research and analysis is a big part of what's driving this organization in a lot of different factors right now. I think that they march to their own beat with certain things. I don't think they're analytically driven. I think there's a little bit more of a gut instinct type approach to the way things are ran at this point in time. That's just my feel on it, though.
Yeah. Okay, so you're going to lead off with the last one. This is, I think, the last one worth even spending 30 seconds on would be Jamarco Jones, UFA. Would you, if you bring him back, it's going to be the minimum, which I'm pretty sure the minimum for him is about $950,000. Yay or nay?
I'm a nay on this one, Brandon. Jamarco Jones to me is a guy that's not really done much of anything. They've another one of those guys they can't ever seem to find a position for. It seems like he's moved all over the offensive line. Another guy I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if you were to interview him and talk to him, would say, if they just put me in one position and let me work at that one, I might have gotten a little bit better at it. With that said, he was athletically challenged coming out of Ohio State. He's always going to have those athletic limitations that won't improve with him getting some more seasoning in the league. I don't think he would cost a lot to bring back, but you are solidified with some very cheap, better options in Stone Forsythe at left tackle and Jay Curhan at right tackle. They basically remove the need for bringing back Jamarco Jones in every way, shape, and form. Better players and cheaper and under club control for multiple years. Kind of makes it a no-brainer.
Yeah, I would not bring him back either. He's had 3 massive injuries now, I think.
Yeah.
3. So
barely
what can
playing.
you do?
Barely playing.
I when he got drafted, I was really excited too. There was a Field Goals article that was all over him.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying like he could be the left tackle of the future if you take a look at what he did in college, and I was excited. But your best ability is your availability, or whatever it is Brock Ewart always says on the radio. So yeah, I think that's
it's kind of what you get to you get with when you get technicians at the college level. He's a technician, but he's athletically challenged, and that's the combination of a player you get, whether it's tackle, guard, center, whatever. Well, then you go to the NFL and you go, okay, well, how much of value is going to be in being a technician but not having great play strength or having good quickness, or that stuff kind of gets exposed after a time. There's only so far being that overachiever technician's going to get you. And that's the reason he dropped in the draft like he did, despite putting out the good tape he did at Ohio State. It was just that there wasn't that ability to move in space like you need from tackles in the modern era.
All right, that's it for this exercise because we got 5 players left on the list, but there's nothing to talk about at all. It's
Not with Marcellus Sutton.
I don't know who that is. I have never heard that name before.
I don't either. That's why I'm saying, I'm like, what the Marcellus Sutton?
Tom Cox, thank you for the $5. What would you consider a successful offseason? I think that if you address the offensive line in a concerted and focused way, then I would be willing to live with the results. If you bring in Teron Armstead and then Armstead has a season plagued by injuries, then I would say, okay, we did the right thing. It just didn't work out. I would consider it successful if we moved on from Bobby Wagner because of all the money we can save there. I would consider it successful if we move off of Carson and Myers. I think these are just pieces that Carroll needs to be willing to let go of. I know he really likes them, but you got to let go. So those would be my things.
Brendan really hit it out of the park with that answer. It's not being sentimental in your approach to roster building. I put as my top 2 priorities this offseason, deal with the offensive line first, deal with the defensive line second, and then do other things beyond that, of course, but make those 2 high priorities on your list like they haven't been in about 5 or 6 years. I'm with Brendan on Bobby Wagner. You've got to move on. I'm in an all-in approach this year. Okay, you didn't move on from Carroll. Okay, if Wilson does remain, and that will operate like he's going to remain until we hear differently. Wilson remains. You're in a go-for-it approach. Well, what does that mean to me? Do all those things I just described, and then on top of it, have an all-in approach to the way that you would deal with the salary cap. I don't want to hear about 2 and 3 year plans. I want you to be all in on this year. I want you putting voidable years on contracts that you know are going to be dead money down the line. I want you to show a willingness to be aggressive and not just sort of tread water through this offseason like you have in years past. That would be a successful offseason to me. They've got to do all of that, not just 1 or 2 of those little things. It takes more of a bigger strokes this year because you've gone so softly over the last couple of off seasons, in my opinion.
Right. I am down with that. So before we wrap up today, there's one more thing I kind of want to quickly go over. We're not going to spend a ton of time here. Most of this stuff we've already gone over, but the other day I made a video where I went over the list of players the Seahawks could cut or trade to gain some extra cap space. And we've already been over all of this. I think we're both on the same page with Bobby. We both think he needs to go. Save a lot of money there.
Yep.
We're both on the same page with bringing back Dunlap, I think, because there's no savings there, really.
Yep.
I think we're both on the same page with letting go of Carson and Myers.
You better.
I think we're both pretty indifferent to Mayowa and Hyder. Do you lean one way or the other there?
Hyder I want to keep because of his run stuffing ability as a defensive end. But Mayowa can take a walk.
Yeah. I know you want LJ Collier out, and I think I do too. So I think we're both in agreement there. But, and I also think we're both in agreement that, not that this is a salary cap concern, but Wilson should stay at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah. And, I'll tell you, a little off topic here. Watching these playoff games this last week, I kind of had that moment where I started kind of thinking to myself, maybe I am a little too hard on Wilson because I was watching Dak Prescott and Kyler Murray. These are 2 quarterbacks who I was watching earlier this year who I was like, why can't Wilson play like this? These guys are constantly checking it down when they get pressure. These guys are just getting the ball out of their hands quickly. And I watched both those guys go out there last weekend and completely failed to do that and played pretty terrible games, doing all the stuff that I criticized Wilson for not doing. Or criticized Wilson for doing. And, Dak's contract is bigger than Wilson's. Kyler's next contract, which he's going to get this offseason, is going to be bigger than Wilson's, I think.
Yeah.
So I did kind of have that moment where I'm like, maybe I am a little, maybe I do need to slow down a little bit here sometimes. It did occur to me.
I mean, it's possible with it. I think that some of the criticism hailed at Wilson has been valid from both your and my standpoint on this to a degree, because we're very specific in what we look at with him. And the thing with it on the things that, at least from where I attack Wilson on these items, the reason I harp on him so much is because it's not lack of talent or ability things. It's head, shoulders up things. It's things he can control in the mentals. With those 2 guys, I think it is telling that you look at those 2 guys you mentioned early on in the year, you liked what you saw versus where they're at now. What did they have early on in the season? The full allotment of all of their stuff. You had no Michael Gallup for Dak Prescott in this game. You had no, and I would say the Cowboys offense is very much its brilliance or its high productivity level it's had has been based on having 3 wide receivers on the outside that are all threats. Wouldn't you agree that that's been a big driver of that? And Kyler Murray, likewise, early on this year, they had every receiver in a very specific role. And the big guy, the guy at the top of that mountain of that receiving core was DeAndre Hopkins. And you come in this playoff game, no DeAndre Hopkins, no Chase Edmonds. You're down a couple things and just down a couple guys. They're no longer as effective as they were. But this is my point on this, Brendan, comes around to why I still have faith in Wilson despite being hard on him. It's because you've not built around him like these teams have built around these quarterbacks. Dak's got a great offensive line, great running back, great receivers. Kyler, offensive line's okay, but they got the receivers, man. 2 running backs. They went and got Zach Ertz in a midseason trade, even when Mac Williams. They've given him those. And that's what I've said they need to do with Wilson as well, I feel like. And sitting at the head of that, of course, is offensive line. But I still have faith in him. But I think you can have faith in the guy and still be able to say, but there's these things of his game that I need to see him also upgrade, especially bringing in this new offense as he was this year, Brendan, because that's the thing we have to keep in mind with this. He's adopting a new offense. He needs to grow in this new offense. We expect bumps in the road, but we wanted to see the growth as we went on. We did see the growth as we went on, but it was really clunky to kind of get there. It took quite a bit of time to start to see the returns of it. But I still have faith, and you have faith on that respect.
Yeah. I just kind of was like, or middle of this season, I was really ready to move on from Wilson. I was really not liking what I saw at all. But you see, Dak's making $40 million a year. I'm watching him. He's doing all the same stuff. He's holding onto the ball too long, not checking it down, going for shot plays when he doesn't need to. Against the Niners defense, by the way, with no Bosa, no Warner, no cornerbacks. Yeah, that was bad. And I kind of did. Maybe this stuff is a little harder than I give it credit for. I never want to stop holding Wilson to a high standard because he puts it on himself with the contract he gets. But I did kind of have that moment where I'm like, okay, maybe I need to ease up just a little bit.
I do. I agree with you there. Where this is where I think we still keep that room for believing that there's still another level of. You would agree with this? I believe. I don't want to speak for in this that there is another level to what Russell Wilson's game that he's not achieved yet, as far as productivity, as far as efficiency, as far as being even a better player than what he's been prior, and that's even losing a little bit of the mobility he has. He has the arm talent. I think he's going to make every throw in the game. But it is about him maturing at the position and bringing on things that have not always been a part of his game. But if he does it, I have 100% faith that he could be going up to the stratosphere as far as his game. But he's got to take those elements on. And we've got to speak to him specifically because it's, I think, the thing that does at times hold him back a bit in getting to that level. That's just this close away from him at times. It's like they're like on a movie where they're just outside the range of the fingers and they're trying to grab something, like they're stuck under something and they're just can barely get it. Like he's that close to it at times for me on that, but he can absolutely attain it.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I want to talk about a few more players who could be let go to save some money. Just tell me whether or not you would consider moving them to save this money. So Poona Ford, due 9.7. You save about half that if you let him go.
I keep him. I keep him.
Yeah, I would too. Gabe Jackson, due 9 million, only due 6 million if you let him go.
Am I getting a left guard somewhere in your pros scenario?
Well, I guess at that point it would still be open-ended, but you would kind of have to, right? Unless you're going to put it all on Phil Haynes, which clearly this organization doesn't want to do.
Let me re-ask it. Would we be aggressive in attacking the left guard position this offseason in your plan? You're running things essentially you're asking me as like, let's say I'm one of your underlings or something, right? And you say, okay, well, we're going to consider this. I come back to you and go, okay, well, GM, are you going to go out there and look for a left guard as a high priority this offseason?
I think at that point you would kind of have to. There's no left guard here except for Haynes.
Well, unless you're riding with Damian Lewis another season at left guard, right? Unless they decide that that's what they want to do, which I don't want it, but that doesn't mean that they don't maybe want to do that. And that's to me, that's why that's the key question there is, are we still riding with Damian Lewis? And if we're still riding with Damian Lewis at left guard, that at that point makes the Gabe Jackson situation different for me, because then it's like, well, I guess we'll just ride with Gabe Jackson moving forward at this point, because I could go out and get a guy, maybe Brandon Scherf or something, to put in at right guard as an improvement. What is he going to be? A mild improvement, an aging right guard? Maybe his best days are behind him. Somewhat, you're not really doing much to really improve the offensive line at that point. Yeah. It's more of a lateral kind of move from my standpoint of things.
Yeah. Would your opinion change at all if you made him a post June 1st cut and had a $3 million cap hit this year and $3 million next year instead of $6 million this year?
It's all about who we're bringing in. to me. And again, if
It's
it's a
not about
guy,
the money for you.
it's not about the money for me because it's a very small amount of money. It's about improving the position. And again, because I'm putting the offensive line with the offensive line having, in my opinion, the highest priority of needing improvement this offseason, or it gets the most priority. I'm not going to be wrapped up in any decision I make on this offensive line and coming back to money being a thing that pulls me back from making a move. I will pay more. I will go over the cost to make this the priority. And it may be required to do so, but that's why I also will go cheaper at other positions to make that happen.
All right, all right. I think that's probably right.
Where do you stand?
I think I would bring back Gabe. I still think he's good, but you could definitely talk me into going another direction if you're willing to actually go in that direction.
Yeah, I think specifics are important here too, right, Brendan? On this one, what is the play? Is it a Brandon Scherf who you're paying more for past performances and name recognition? Is it a guy that's maybe up and coming as a guy that's like he's just ascending to becoming a great right guard in this league? One thing is for sure, I'll say on this, Brendan, right guards tend to proliferate the free agent market in the offseason. It did last offseason. There was about 9 of them versus like Joe Thuney at left guard, right? You had all these other guys and then Joe Thuney.
Yeah.
That was about it at left.
Okay, so 2 more. First guy is Nick Bellore, due $2.75 million, which seems a lot to me for a special teamer. Only 600,000 dead if you cut him, so you save 2.2 million almost. What are you doing?
Is he under contract next season?
No, this is the last year of his deal.
I re-signed him to a 3-year. I re-signed him to a 3-year, $6 million deal with 2 low-end first years get out in the 3rd year of the deal. But I lower it down to where he's basically making like $1.5 million over the next 2 each this year and next year. So he's making basically like $3 million over the course of the first 2 years of the contract.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can justify Bellore for almost $3 million.
No.
I don't care how good he is on special teams. That I know we already did it, right? We already did like the backloading with him. The first year was really cheap, so this year's expensive. But now you get out of this year and you got to do it again. But yeah, I would definitely bring Bellore back, but you can't bring him back for that price. I agree. Final guy, Marquise Blair, due $2 million, only due 650,000 if you bring him back. 2 devastating injuries in a row. Is he worth bringing back for another year?
We kind of need to talk to the doctors, don't we, Brendan? I mean, we kind of have to, don't we, on this one? I mean, what is the long-term outlook on this second surgery that he's just had? And I mean, if they're going to tell me that, look, we've got this, we've already got some issues with his ACL he tore, we got some worries about that long-term. If those are real concerns coming from my doctors and consulting them, there's a good chance that I move off of him after this year. Now, if they tell me that great chances he should become near 100% of what he was, it was a freakish injury, just like the tore ACL was a freakish injury. Okay. I'll tell you this, he is slight for the safety position. He looks like he weighs about 190 pounds soaking wet. You know, I mean, and you think maybe slight guys have a little more chance of being broken down a little bit more in the NFL level. So I do have worries. If I'm not mistaken, he was injured back in college a couple times too a bit. So that's going to drive my decision on that, Brendan, is really what the doctors tell me. If I got the clean bill of health, I'll bring him back because we need safety help. He can play both safety positions. Jamal's beat all to hell. We don't know if we're getting Neal back. We don't know what's going to happen at free safety. So there is a need there. But I can't, if they're going to tell me that he's a huge injury risk, then no.
Yeah. I mean, the savings are not big, but 1.35 million, that could go a long way if you apply it in the right places. So that's really about it. There were a couple other guys like Tyler Ott, but you're not going to cut Tyler Ott. Like, when was the last time Tyler Ott didn't do his job?
No, and you need a long snapper. You're going to sign somebody else if it's not him, you know, unless you're trying to draft the best long snapper in college in the 6th round or something. By the way, what do you do with Marquise Blair?
Oh boy. See, mentally, I've already checked out on him. I feel like he's not going to ever do it.
Yeah.
But even with that, I guess he's worth $2 million for one more year. I mean, his rookie deal expires after this year, so you can just let him walk.
Yeah.
At that point, I guess I bring him back, but I'll tell you, mentally, I'm already like, I'm done with him.
I'm the same way with you. I'm not counting on him at any point right now as far as, we'll slot him into our starting free safety if we lose Quandary Diggs. No, I'm not doing that. But it's really, I'm right on the fence with keeping or letting him go. And it would be to be medical, but Yeah.
I will admit that I think he was better at nickel than Ugo was when we were rotating those two guys. I think Blair was better at nickel, but it's just to me the two massive injuries. I know the first one was kind of fluky, but I'm not big into it. I just feel like that's already kind of dead.
Yeah, we've got a lot of injury-prone players on this team. We need to get some more availability players.
Right. I think that's about it for this show. So thank you so much, Brandon, for coming out tonight. We
Thank you
went
for having me,
a
man.
solid 2 hours.
Hell yeah.
That's our thoughts on all the outgoing Seahawks free agents. And hey, Pete Carroll, he's running out of scapegoats, right? If things don't turn around quickly, hey, that's a positive, right? No matter what you felt about Ken Norton, no matter how you feel about this firing, Pete's running out of scapegoats, and I think that's an objective good.
Well, there's only so many pounds of flesh to cut off from himself, right?
Right, exactly. And at this point, the only guys left would be John and Russ. That's the only two people left that Pete can scapegoat. And sorry, nobody's going to fall for John. Nobody's going to fall for that. So
no.
If this season does not go well in 2022, then I think we all know that one of two things will happen next offseason. And I guess that is at least interesting. So,
well, it's to give us hope. If we get a wash, rinse, repeat, we got hope that we get true change at that point. It would suck that it would take a year and we'd have to go through another season of it, but is what it is. We can't push Jody's Allen. Pete's coming back, and you never know. Maybe he finds a way to somehow right the ship.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. We were up near 200 viewers at one point. We're still at about 140. Thank you all for coming out. We'll be doing this again in the future on his channel next time. I think we're going to just go next week and keep on this off-season train going. But that's it for tonight. See you guys later. And as always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.